Chapter 479. The newest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more interesting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found online are all here. The moon was dark and the wind was strong. Because of the successive battles, the capital had fallen into a tense and alert state. Yuan Tang had already been hiding in the capital for several days, like a rat crossing the street. He had lived for so many years, but he had never been in such a sorry state. When Gu Jiao told him that his royal uncle wanted to rebel, he didn't believe it. After all, his royal uncle was the previous emperor's most beloved son. Back then, when his royal father was still the crown prince of the Qin kingdom, he had committed a serious crime. It was his royal uncle who tried his best to redress his crimes and help his royal father keep his position as crown prince. How could people not trust King Bo's uncle like this? As for his maternal family, the Rong family, the daughter of the Rong family, who was his mother, was the imperial concubine of Qin. She was above one person and below tens of thousands of people. She was only waiting to be conferred the title of empress. King Bo's uncle and the Rong family were not related by marriage. Did water enter the Rong family's brain? They didn't help their own daughter and grandson, but helped an outsider? He felt that Gu Jiao must have made a mistake, or she was maliciously trying to sow discord between him and King Bo's uncle. But he still had a plan, and ordered people to keep an eye on the movements of the Zhao country's royal family. It wasn't until the emperor ordered people to capture him that he realized the seriousness of the matter. He was the first to escape. A few days after he escaped, news came from the border that Qin country's army was pressing on the border, and Zhao country had lost 3 cities. It was also at that moment that he finally understood that Gu Jiao didn't lie to him. His uncle King Bo really rebelled. The emperor was still ordering people to capture him. He probably thought that by capturing him, he could threaten the Qin state. However, Gu Jiao was right. It was not his imperial father who wanted to violate the agreement between the 2 states. It was his imperial uncle, Prince Bo. So even if he was killed, his uncle wouldn't bat an eye. It was a dead end for him right now. He didn't know how his father was. Since Prince Bo's royal uncle dared to do such a thing, he must have taken control of the royal court, and might have even put his royal father under house arrest. Thinking of this, Yuan Tang's face turned cold. Let's look over there. The voice of the imperial guard came from not far away. This kind of situation where they could be exposed at any time had happened countless times. Yuan Tang had gradually become numb from the initial indignation. However, he did not dare to let his guard down. Otherwise, once he was caught, his life would be gone. Imperial uncle would not protect him, and Zhao country would not let him go. He was someone that both sides wanted to kill as soon as possible. Yuan Tang passed through an alley at the side. As soon as he arrived at a main street, he was blocked by Lu Yixing. Lu Yixing hired a carriage. He lifted the curtain and said, "Follow me." However, Yuan Tang did not step forward. Instead, he looked at Lu Yixing with a complicated expression. The sound of footsteps behind him gradually approached. Without looking back, he disappeared into the night. He couldn't implicate his cousin. Even if he died, he would die alone in Zhao country. On the other side, the news of losing 3 cities at the border, and the old Marquis being captured reached Marquis Ding in manner. "What did you say?" "The old man was captured at the border." In the study, Marquis Gu looked at Huang Zhong in disbelief. "Did you hear wrong? Didn't the old man go on a scenic tour? How did he end up at the border? That is a bitter and cold place." Huang Zhong was at his wits' end as he said, "It is absolutely true, Marquis. The remnants of the previous dynasty colluded with the Qin country's army at the border. They did not hesitate to sell out the country to help the Qin country advance to the border. The news of the old man being captured has already spread throughout the palace." How could it be like this? Marquis Gu fell into his chair in a daze. Huang Zhong said with worry, "The Empress Dowager is furious. She ordered the heir to return to the capital. She said, she wants to reorganize the Gu family's army. She wants the heir to lead the Gu family's army north to fight against the enemy." Marquis Gu's expression changed again. "Chongqing is also going to the border?" He was only 21 years old. He had never been to a battlefield so far away, nor had he experienced such a fierce battle. With 100,000 Gu family soldiers heading north, there would be a tough battle ahead. Outside the study, Gu Qingfeng, who had inadvertently overheard the conversation, felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He knew that his grandfather had secretly gone to the border under the emperor's orders, but he never expected that his grandfather would not only fail to save Princess Ning'an, but also lose his own life. He didn't know who the remnants of the previous dynasty were, but based on concubine Jing, he could roughly deduce that they were vicious and merciless. His grandfather's life would be in danger if he fell into their hands. His eldest brother was far away near Fengdu Mountain. It would take some time for him to return to the capital and reorganize the Gu family's army. If he were to head north to the border, he didn't know if his grandfather would live to see his eldest brother. His grandfather would not allow himself to be used as a bargaining chip to impede his eldest brother and the Gu family's army. If the remnants of the previous dynasty used him to threaten his eldest brother, his grandfather would rather die than submit. Gu Qingfeng returned to his own courtyard. He found his night clothes and put them on, then put on his mask and picked up a few hidden weapons he had bought from Thousand Secrets Pavilion. After doing all this, he went to the next room. At this time, Gu Qinglin had already rested. Gu Qingfeng came to the bedside and looked at Gu Qinglin, who was sleeping soundly. He tucked him in, touched his hair that had grown out a little, and stuffed the banknotes he had on him under his pillow. In the future, you'll have to buy your own hair restorer. After saying this, he reluctantly took one last look at his younger brother. At this time, he was actually envious of Gu Yan and the newborn. At least those two had so many people to care for them, while Gu Qinglin only had him left. But now even he had to leave. This time, he wasn't just going to do a simple mission. He was going to the border and infiltrate the enemy's camp. Whether he lived or died was unknown. If he didn't come back. If I don't come back, you'll have to take care of yourself in the future, understand? Gu Qinglin, who was sleeping soundly, didn't know that his brother had left. He turned over and slept peacefully. In the end, Gu Qingfeng still left. He gently closed the door for his younger brother, and went to the stable to secretly ride his father's Fergana horse. Jade Water Alley. The family had a busy day and went back to their rooms to rest. Gu Jiao went to the east room to check on the baby. The baby's jaundice had disappeared, and the wrinkles on his face were gradually smoothed out. He was a fair and tender little cutie. Jiao Jiao. Little Jing Kong appeared behind her with a pillow in his arms. You're still awake? Gu Jiao turned to look at him. Yes, I miss you a little. Little Jing Kong said seriously. Gu Jiao smiled and patted his little head. I'll send you there. Okay. Little Jing Kong held his little pillow with one hand, and held Gu Jiao's hand with the other. He skipped to the next room. He lay on the soft bed, opened his big round eyes and said obediently, Jiao Jiao. Yes. I've covered myself with the quilt. Good boy. Gu Jiao touched his forehead. Go to sleep. Little Jing Kong closed his eyes obediently. After a while, he opened his eyes again. Jiao Jiao? I'm here. He closed his eyes again with peace of mind. He held Gu Jiao's hand with his little hand, and didn't hide his dependence and need. Gu Jiao stayed with him until he fell asleep, and began to snore evenly. Then she got up, and went back to the backyard through the small passage. Of course. Gu Jiao rolled her eyes and swallowed the words at the tip of her tongue. She raised her eyebrows and said, I'm coming back. Do you want me to see you bathe? Xiaoheng never expected that she would be thinking about this at the moment of parting. He was stunned, but at the same time he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of girl was this? He chuckled softly and walked a few steps closer to her. His strong arm gently hooked around her waist. It seemed domineering, but he was also restraining himself. He clearly didn't touch her, but Gu Jiao felt as if her waist was on fire. This fire burned all the way to the bottom of her heart, and made her little head dizzy. This feeling was very strange. Oh, I want to do something. It's so strange. Xiaoheng stared at her and took in her dazed and drooling little face. He tugged at the corner of his lips and said to her in a somewhat bewitching and hoarse voice, Okay, come back and I'll let you see. Remember, I'll come back safely. If I lose a strand of hair, I'll wear an extra layer of clothes. Digression. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more fully. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896428226/10971408. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 480. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Jiao was silent for a few seconds. Without saying anything, she opened the cabinet and took out the soft armor that old he gave her from the underground martial arts arena. She didn't want to wear it because it was ugly. After that, Gu Jiao found all kinds of sharp weapons at home. There were 2 daggers at her waist, 2 lancets hidden in her narrow sleeves, a few silver needles in her hair bun, a few blades hidden in the soles of her shoes, and even a small hidden weapon under her tongue. Xiaoheng. That's not necessary. Gu Jiao set off fully armed. Her red tasseled spear was a little eye-catching, so Xiaoheng wrapped it with a cloth. Xiaoheng watched her leave Jade Water Alley and disappear into the boundless night. He stood in place, lost in thought for a long time. It was late at night, and the lights of the thousands of houses were gradually extinguished. The capital fell into the silence of the night. However, the Imperial Guards patrolling the streets and alleys didn't stop for a moment. They moved lightly, trying not to disturb the people along the way. Gu Qingfeng arrived at the north gate under the watchful eyes of the Imperial Guards. The city gate had long been closed, but as the legitimate son of the Gu family, he knew that there was a secret passage near the north gate. Under normal circumstances, 2 to 4 guards would take turns to guard it. Because it was hidden, not many people knew about it. Therefore, the guards on duty weren't too powerful. Gu Qingfeng could easily break through by himself, but he had a horse in his hand. Gu Qingfeng looked at the horse behind him, and the horse looked back at him. The man and the horse stared at each other. For a moment, Gu Qingfeng even regretted stealing his father's horse. Although the horse was good, it was difficult to get it out. Forget it. Since he had already come this far, it would be a pity to abandon the horse. Moreover, a horse of such quality couldn't be bought at the courier station. Break out. A large group of Imperial Guards was nearby. In the end, Gu Qingfeng could only close his eyes and grit his teeth helplessly. I'm sorry, father. I can only trick you. 15 minutes later, Gu Qingfeng put on his bamboo hat and rode on Marquis Gu's Fergana horse. He held Marquis Gu's personal token and appeared outside the secret passage. When the guard on duty saw the token, he looked at the man on the horse with a strange expression and asked, "You are?" Gu Qingfeng lowered his voice and imitated his father's voice. "You don't even recognize me. His Majesty has ordered this Marquis to leave the capital at night. This Marquis has official business to attend to, so why don't you let this Marquis go with you? How many heads do you have to chop off for delaying His Majesty's important matters? I wouldn't dare." After the leader of the guards finished speaking, he hurriedly signaled his subordinates to make way, and he himself also stood respectfully to the side. In reality, they had never seen Marquis Gu and could not tell if Marquis Gu's voice was real or fake. However, the token that Gu Qingfeng showed was real. In addition, Marquis Ding and Fu was the emperor's trusted aide. In addition, the court had one incident after another, not to mention the Empress Dowager's order for Gu Changqing to reorganize the Gu family's army. With everything put together, no one suspected that there would be someone pretending to be Marquis Gu to pass on the emperor's orders. This was a capital crime punishable by beheading. Gu Qingfeng estimated that his father would be brought to the emperor for questioning the next day. However, since the court placed his eldest brother and the Gu family's army in an important position, Then they would not take his father's life. At most, they would punish his father for not teaching his son well. For example, they would give him 100 paddles or something. Marquis Gu was sleeping when he suddenly shivered. He did not know what had happened. After Gu Qingfeng left the city, he galloped all the way to the north. Fearing that the guards would realize what had happened, he galloped until the horse was panting heavily. Only then did he stop. He turned back to look. They shouldn't have caught up, right? Don't worry, they didn't catch up. A small careless voice sounded from behind the trees. Gu Qingfeng shuddered and almost fell off the horse's back. In the middle of the night, there was a voice from behind the tree. Was it a person or a ghost? Wait, that voice was a bit familiar. Gu Qingfeng composed himself and turned his head to look in the direction of the tree. Earlier, he had not looked carefully because he was in a hurry. Now, using the thin moonlight, he saw a horse tied to a tall Chinese parasol tree. Beside the horse stood a young man in green clothes. The young man crossed his arms and leaned against the tree behind him. After saying that, the young man walked out from the shadow of the tree. Gu Qingfeng saw her face clearly. It's really you? He was shocked. Gu Jiao's finger pointed at the arm around her. She tilted her head and said, Are you very surprised? How? How can I not be surprised? What are you doing here in the middle of the night instead of sleeping? You've already left the capital. No, it was at least 20 to 30 li away from the capital. Gu Qingfeng looked at her suspiciously. You're not going to make me run errands for you again, are you? I'm warning you. This time I won't go with you no matter what. I have something important to do. Something very, very important. A human life was at stake. Oh. Gu Jiao made a sound and let go of her arms. She straightened her body and touched the tall and strong horse. She nimbly flipped onto the horse. Only then did Gu Qingfeng realize that she was also riding a top-notch horse, which was not inferior to his father's mount in the slightest. Didn't you say you were going to leave? Gu Jiao looked at him strangely. Gu Qingfeng was too surprised and did not understand the meaning of this sentence. He stared straight at her horse. Didn't you not know how to ride a horse? I'm not good at it. Gu Jiao corrected him. But I should be good at it in the future. After all, it was 1,000 li from here to the frontier fortress. It was enough for her to practice. Gu Qingfeng still did not understand what she meant. His gaze moved away from her horse and fell on her back. The small basket she always carried was hanging on the saddle. It was replaced by a large thing wrapped in cloth. Even though it was wrapped in cloth, Gu Qingfeng could still faintly feel a strong aura. What are you carrying on your back? He asked curiously. A red tasseled spear. Gu Jiao said. What red tasseled spear is so big? The suspicion in Gu Qingfeng's eyes grew heavier. Also, why are you carrying this thing on your back in the middle of the night? Gu Jiao looked at him indifferently. Are you still going or not? Of course I'm going. Before Gu Qingfeng could finish speaking, Gu Jiao urged her horse forward. Gu Qingfeng looked in the direction she was going and reminded her. Hey, are you going the wrong way? That's not the way to the capital. Gu Jiao said indifferently. Who said I'm going back to the capital? Gu Qingfeng sneered. If you're not going back to the capital, are you going to the frontier fortress with me? As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly widened. He urged his horse to Gu Jiao's side and looked at her cold face. You can't be noisy. Gu Jiao directly took out a cornbread from her bag and stuffed it into his mouth. Gu Qingfeng's mouth was stuffed. He whimpered a few times and took the cornbread down. He urged his horse to ride side by side with her. Wait, tell me clearly. Are you really going to the frontier fortress? What are you going to do there? Don't you know that there's a war at the frontier fortress? The Chun Kingdom's army has already taken over 3 cities at the frontier fortress. It's not a good place to go sightseeing. Gu Jiao pulled the reins. Yes. Gu Qingfeng frowned. This girl didn't seem to have that much free time. Hey, don't tell me you want to go to the frontier fortress because you heard that something happened to your grandfather? Gu Qingfeng muttered. You're not the real Gu Jiao's mother. You don't need to care about my grandfather's matters. The frontier fortress was too dangerous. Princess Ning'an had 3 dragon shadow guards by her side, but they were still captured by the remnants of the previous dynasty. It was clear how difficult it was to deal with those people. This wasn't a muddy water she should wade into. Gu Qingfeng looked at her seriously. Tell me the truth. Are you going to the frontier fortress or not? And why are you going to the frontier fortress? Being able to ask the second question meant that Gu Qingfeng already had an answer to the first question in his heart. To save someone, Gu Jiao said. Who are you saving? Gu Qingfeng asked. A brother. Gu Jiao paused. And a fool. Brother? Then it didn't seem to be his grandfather. Gu Qingfeng wasn't in a hurry to ask who her brother was, nor did he ask who the fool was. In short, it couldn't be him. Gu Qingfeng said again. Speaking of which, how did you get out of the city? Gu Jiao made an O sound and said, I rode out on a horse. Gu Qingfeng opened his mouth. From the north gate? Gu Jiao said. Or are there other gates? Gu Qingfeng frowned. Isn't the city gate already closed? Did you come out very early? Gu Jiao shook her head. No, just a little earlier than you. I have an imperial edict. Gu Qingfeng was flabbergasted. You? Why do you have an imperial edict? Are you going north by imperial edict? If this girl had an imperial edict, then why did he have to risk the crime of deceiving the emperor to come out of the secret passage? Gu Jiao shook her head again. I asked His Majesty for it. I said I wanted to go out, and His Majesty gave it to me. He also gave me a horse. Gu Qingfeng, who had suffered a blow. I suddenly don't want to talk to you anymore. Digression. Versailles, we are serious. Also, I'm only 10 votes away from reaching 3,000. Will I be able to reach 3,000 before the end of the year? The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_8964226/10971224. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. Chapter 481. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng set off on their journey to the north. Yuan Tang, who was trapped in the capital, was not so lucky. He could not get the imperial edict from the emperor of Zhao country, nor could he use the secret passage at the north gate. He tried several times to sneak out of the city with the caravan, but he always failed. As the battle at the frontier fortress escalated, more and more bad news came back to the court. The emperor's anger towards Yuan Tang became more and more intense. Since a few days ago, even the palace masters were ordered by the emperor to capture Yuan Tang. Yuan Tang encountered 3 waves of palace masters last night, causing him to lose contact with his subordinates. When the sun was about to rise, he finally fought his way out of the encirclement, but he also paid a terrible price. His right arm was cut. If he encountered another palace master, he could not guarantee that he would be lucky enough to escape. He's injured and can't go far. You guys go over there. The rest of you follow me. Yuan Tang tightly covered his right arm and hid in a family's stable. Listening to the palace masters outside the walls, he could not help but show some irritation and despair. He was the 6th prince of Qin country. The empress had passed away. His mother had the highest position in the harem. His mother was the vice-empress. His maternal family was the Rong family, which held military power. He was the most honorable prince of Qin country. Since his birth he had almost never suffered. Even when he came to Zhao country as a hostage, he only wanted to gain some merit and become the crown prince. Thanks to his royal uncle, Prince Bo, he was able to pay back all the sufferings he had suffered in the past 20 years. His wound hurt again. Yuan Tang frowned. Just at this moment, the servants of the house came. In the stable, they suddenly saw an unfamiliar man in a sorry state with blood dripping from his arm. The servant instinctively screamed. Ah! Yuan Tang knocked him out with a karate chop. However, the voice still traveled out and the imperial guards rushed to the stables. Yuan Tang had no choice but to leave and find another hiding place. There were imperial guards in front and behind him, and the right side was a dead end. There was only a carriage parked on the left side. Yuan Tang had no choice but to hide in it. The carriage didn't look big, but it was quite spacious inside. It was also a little tasteful. The bench was covered with a cloth. He lifted the cloth and tucked his tall body under the bench. In such a narrow space, a big guy like him was really wronged. Sir Xiao, please take care. In the study room next to the carriage, the boss personally sent Xiao Heng out. Please wait a moment. Xiao Heng nodded. After speaking to the boss, he turned around and boarded the carriage that was parked at the side of the road. The coachman came out of the study room with a large pile of the 4 treasures of the study. Xiao Heng had just received a transfer order from the Ministry of Personnel this morning, appointing him as a secondary grade 5 scribe of the Ministry of Justice. Clerks were mainly responsible for organizing files, managing official seals, and drafting documents. His official position in the Hanlin Academy didn't change. He only held the position of a scribe at the same time. This was the idea of the Minister of Justice. He had submitted it to the Ministry of Personnel last month. The positions of the 6 ministries were different from those of the Hanlin Academy. They weren't under the jurisdiction of the cabinet. After receiving the document from the Minister of Justice, the Ministry of Personnel first reviewed it internally, and then submitted it to the Emperor for him to review. It was very rare for an official to hold multiple positions, especially across departments. The requirements for the official themselves were very high. Whether it was strength, energy, or accomplishment, they must be much better than their colleagues. The Emperor was worried that Xiao Liulong's body couldn't take it. Secondly, he was worried that he would be ostracized if he was too popular. The Emperor called the old Chancellor into the palace and asked for his opinion. The old Chancellor didn't think of this at first. Now that someone had taken the lead, he couldn't wait to send Xiao Heng to a high position. Now that we are in need of people, Your Majesty might as well let Xiao Lulang try first. If he can't take care of both, then we can make other plans. The Emperor felt that the old Chancellor's words were reasonable, so he approved Xiao Liulong's official position. Xiao Heng had just reported to the Ministry of Justice and was about to return to the Hanlin Academy. When he passed by this study room, he remembered that he didn't have much ink and brushes at home, so he stopped the carriage to buy some. As soon as he entered the carriage, he felt that something was wrong. The curtain of the carriage was open. The carriage was very ventilated, but he still smelled a faint smell of blood. Lord Xiao, I'll put the things here. The coachman put a big box of 4 treasures of the study on the floor of the carriage. He wasn't as sensitive as Xiao Heng and didn't find anything strange. Are we returning to the Hanlin Academy now? Do you want to buy something else? No need. Xiao Heng said. Okay, then I'll go out. The coachman put down the curtain and sat back on the bench outside. Xiao Heng wasn't in a hurry to sit down. Instead, he vigilantly looked at the bench covered with brocade cloth. Under the bench, Yuan Tang clenched his wound. Sweat seeped out of his forehead because of the tension and pain. He didn't know whose carriage this was, but he heard the coachman call him Lord Xiao and ask him if he wanted to go to the Hanlin Academy. There was only one official with the surname Xiao in the Hanlin Academy, and that was Dr. Gu's husband, Xiao Lulang. Yuan Tang and Xiao Lulang had never officially met face to face. They had only seen each other a few times from afar. He knew that Xiao Lulang was Dr. Gu's husband, this year's top scholar, and was now working in the Hanlin Academy. As for whether Xiao Heng knew him, Yuan Tang wasn't sure. But if he really saw his current appearance, even if Xiao Lulang didn't know him, he should be able to guess who he was. Whether Xiao Lulang was a friend or a foe, Yuan Tang didn't dare to easily come to a conclusion. Although he was Gu Jiao's husband, he and Shi Yi were officials of the imperial court. If they were officials of the imperial court, then they had to arrest him and bring him to justice. Yuan Tang bit down hard on his lips to prevent himself from making a sound. He had no intention of harming Gu Jiao's family, but if he really wanted to arrest him, Then he would have no choice but to offend him. Whose carriage is that in front? A group of imperial guards stopped in front of the carriage. The one who asked this question was the commander of the group. They had chased them all the way and surrounded them, but that brat Yuan Tang seemed to have disappeared without a trace. They guessed that Yuan Tang must be hiding right under their noses. If he wasn't in a nearby shop, then he must be in a passing carriage. Xiao Heng looked at the blood slowly flowing out from under the bench. His eyes moved slightly. He turned around and walked forward. He lifted up his clothes and sat down. His right foot just happened to step on the flowing blood. The coachman and the imperial guards talked for a while. Then he lifted the curtain slightly and said to Xiao Heng, "Lord Xiao, the imperial guards said that they were trying to capture a hostage from the Qin Empire. They hope that you can search our carriage." Xiao Heng raised his hand and gestured for the coachman to lift the curtain. The coachman bowed and lifted the curtain as far as it could, allowing the imperial guards to clearly see the situation inside the carriage. Xiao Heng sat upright in the carriage with a serious expression. His appearance was young and handsome, but his aura was exceptionally strong. His eyes revealed an imposing manner without being angry. "Do you need to come up and search carefully?" The commander was stunned by Xiao Liulong's appearance and aura. He was stunned for a while before coming back to his senses. He probably realized that he had lost his composure. He hurriedly lowered his head and cupped his hands in salute. "There's no need. We have already seen clearly. We hope that Lord Xiao will forgive us for disturbing you." Xiao Heng was someone who was highly regarded by both the emperor and the empress dowager. Even if the commander had 8 times the courage, he wouldn't dare to offend him easily. Moreover, it was quite rude of him to stare at him like that. "It's fine," Xiao Heng said. The commander said politely, "Then we will continue to search. Lord Xiao, farewell." Xiao Heng nodded. "Farewell." The commander planned to take the rest of the imperial guards to search the nearby shops. Just as he turned around, he heard the sound of something dripping on the ground. The sound was very soft, but there weren't many people on the street at the moment. The surroundings were very quiet. Yuan Tang's expression suddenly changed. His blood was dripping down the cracks in the floorboards. This was the end. He was going to be discovered. "What are you standing there for?" Xiao Heng snapped at the coachman. "How much longer are you going to make me bleed? Hurry up and go to the medical center." The coachman was stunned. Was His Excellency injured? When? Xiao Heng's aura was too strong. The coachman didn't have the courage to ask him what was wrong. He hurriedly lowered the curtain and said, Yes, we will go to the medical center now." The moment before the curtain was lowered, the commander saw that there was blood seeping out of Xiao Liulong's right foot. So His Excellency was really injured? The commander frowned. He was a little suspicious, but he was still afraid of Xiao Liulong's status. Sure, he also didn't think Xiao Lulang would lie. In the end, he didn't go to check. The coachman drove the carriage to the nearest medical center. Suddenly, he heard His Excellency say, "Don't go to the medical center. Go to the north gate." Ah! The coachman was startled again. "His Excellency Xiao, aren't you injured? We're almost at the medical center. I just remembered that the carriage has some medicine for wounds. I'll just apply some ointment myself." Then okay. The coachman was confused. He didn't understand how His Excellency's temper changed so quickly. His Excellency wants to go to the north gate? Xiao Heng's tone was normal. "I originally planned to go in the afternoon, but after thinking about it, I think it's better to go now." Okay. The coachman's status was low, so he didn't dare ask about Xiao Heng's official business. He drove the carriage to the north gate. Xiao Heng flashed the Ministry of Justice's token. "Investigate the case." The city guards let them go. Xiao Heng went to the nearest courier station outside the north gate. "Feed the horses some food," he ordered the coachman. Yes. The coachman unloaded the reins and shaft of the carriage, then took the horses to the courier station's stable. Xiao Heng got out of the carriage with an indifferent expression. He sat in the courier station for a quarter of an hour before returning to the carriage. At this time, the smell of Yuan Tang had disappeared from the carriage. The coachman walked over with the horses that had eaten their fill. "His Excellency," Xiao Heng said indifferently, Return to the capital. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found on the internet can be found here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964226/1096905884. HTML Genius memorized the website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 482. This book's newest chapter is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. For Xiaoheng, today was a joyous day for his promotion. For the Yuan Tang who had finally escaped from the capital, it was also a day worthy of celebration. The capital's Marquis Gu was not so lucky. First, he felt a chill run down his spine in the middle of the night, feeling that something big was about to happen. As expected, he was caught in the early morning before he even woke up. He was completely dumbfounded. What was this situation? Why was he caught for no reason? His father was caught at the border and he was caught in the capital. What kind of trouble was this? Marquis Gu. The one who caught him was none other than Xiaoheng's new superior, Xing Shangshu. Xing Shangshu sternly said, "You are suspected of deceiving the ruler. This official needs you to make a trip to the Ministry of Justice." Marquis Gu was dumbfounded. "Wait, speak clearly. Who deceives the ruler?" Xing Shangshu had already expected him to say this. He brought in the guards who had been on duty last night and asked the leader, "What happened last night while you were on duty? Speak in detail." The leader of the guard said, "Last night, Marquis Gu made a fake imperial edict and left the capital through the secret passage at the north gate." Marquis Gu angrily said, "This marquis stayed in the manor the entire night. When did I leave the city? When did I make a fake imperial edict?" Xing Shangshu looked at the guard. "Are you sure you didn't see wrong? In front of Marquis Gu?" The guard sternly said, "That person was holding Marquis Ding An's token." His voice was also the same as Marquis Gu's. Marquis Gu's eyes turned cold. "Don't slander me. What did he look like?" Xing Shangshu asked. The guard was intimidated by Marquis Gu's aura. He looked at Xing Shangshu and said, "He was wearing a bamboo hat. This one did not see clearly." Marquis Gu's anger had nowhere to vent. "Go to the manor and investigate. This marquis did not leave the manor. There must be someone pretending to be this marquis. That token is also fake. This marquis token is clearly..." Marquis Gu said and reached for the token in his wide sleeve, but unexpectedly, he touched nothing. Where's his token?" Marquis. Not good. Second young master is missing." It was Huang Zhong's voice. Gu Qingfeng was gone. Marquis Gu's token was also missing. If Marquis Gu still couldn't figure out what had happened, it wouldn't make sense. "Marquis, your horse is gone too." Marquis Gu clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. Unfilial son. This unfilial son. Why didn't he realize that his second brother was so daring before? Without a word, he stole his horse and token and left the capital with a fake imperial edict. Why did he leave the capital? Heavens! After Minister Xing's careful questioning, it was confirmed that the height and figure of the Marquis Gu from last night basically matched Gu Qingfeng's. The characteristics of the horse also all matched Marquis Gu's horse. It was Gu Qingfeng who confirmed it. Even though it wasn't Marquis Gu who had deceived the emperor, his son had deceived the emperor. As his father, he wasn't clean either. The Minister of Justice reported the results of his investigation to the emperor. Just as Gu Qingfeng had expected, his father was severely punished by the emperor with 100 strikes. The son had to pay for the father's debts, and the father had to pay for the son's debts. The emperor showed no mercy. Marquis Gu suffered an unexpected calamity and was beaten until he cried out in pain. It was a tragic sight. Huang Zhong had already calmed down. He didn't know when it started, but his marquis was already on the path of being beaten, never to return. He once again skillfully carried him onto the carriage. The frontier fortress was thousands of li away. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng hurried on without stopping. In order to get to the frontier fortress as quickly as possible, they changed horses at almost every relay station. The two of them traveled even at night. Even so, affected by the weather and the roads, it still took them nearly 20 days to reach the frontier fortress. At the end of October, cold winds howled and thousands of li were sealed in ice. Beiyang City, Lingguan City, and Yi City had all fallen. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng were currently in Yuegu City. If nothing unexpected happened, Yuegu City would be the next target of the Chun army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Perhaps because of the impending war, Yuegu City was in a state of panic. There were very few people on the streets, and many shops were closed. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng wore thick fox fur coats and led their horses through the somewhat empty streets. They had long discovered that the further north they went, the more desolate the city became. Many people had even abandoned their hometowns and fled south with their families. A 7 or 8-year-old girl was being led by her family in a hurry. However, she accidentally fell and coincidentally fell at Gu Jiao's feet. Gu Jiao reached out and helped the girl up. The girl's family didn't even have time to thank her before they led the child away in panic. They were worried that if they stayed any longer, the city gates would close and they wouldn't be able to leave tonight. Yuegu City was going to war. Although they didn't know when it would be, it was always right to leave early. Hey, you dropped something. Gu Qingfeng picked up an old rattledrum on the ground. The girl turned around and looked at the rattledrum. Her eyes were filled with longing and reluctance. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you. Gu Qingfeng waited for Gu Jiao to speak. Gu Jiao didn't. Gu Qingfeng remembered that this girl didn't know how to pronounce fake sounds. He cleared his throat and said, "It's fine. How should I address the two of you?" Advisor Hu asked respectfully. Gu Qingfeng put on the airs of an official and said, "It's inconvenient for us to reveal our identities. Don't ask." "Ah yes." Advisor Hu returned the token to Gu Qingfeng. Gu Qingfeng thought for a moment and accepted it for Gu Jiao. Advisor Hu invited the two into the governor's residence. Gu Qingfeng said in an accent, "Find a quiet courtyard. We might have to stay in Yuegu City for a few days." Yes. I'll arrange it right away." Advisor Hu hurriedly responded and led the two to a clean courtyard. There were 3 rooms in the courtyard. Gu Qingfeng let Gu Jiao stay in the innermost room, and he stayed in the room next door. "I'll go and pick a few clever servants," Advisor Hu said with a smile. Gu Qingfeng glanced at Gu Jiao and saw that she had no intention of refusing. He nodded to Advisor Hu and said, "Thank you for your trouble." Advisor Hu respectfully withdrew from the courtyard. The steward curiously followed and said, "Advisor, who are those 2 people? Why are you so polite to them? You even let them stay in Liuxiang courtyard." That courtyard was originally. Halfway through he was interrupted by Advisor Hu who whispered, "What do you know? They have Empress Dowager Zhuang's token in their hands. They're from the capital." The steward was dumbfounded. Gu Jiao did not care what kind of uproar her identity had caused in the governor's office. She entered the room, took off her mask, took off her red-tasseled spear and small basket, and put them down. It was freezing outside, but the room was very warm because of the heated Kong bed. Gu Qingfeng walked in and took off his mask while saying to her, "Strange, haven't you been hiding your identity well all this time? Why didn't you hide here?" Gu Jiao took off her deerskin gloves and said, "There's no need to hide. Our whereabouts have been exposed." Gu Qingfeng's eyes widened. "When were we exposed? Why didn't I know?" Gu Jiao said, "We were exposed when we entered Yuegu City." In the dream, Gu Qingfeng was targeted in Yuegu City. If nothing unexpected happened, someone would come tonight to drug Gu Qingfeng. Digression. Farewell to the old and welcome the new. Happy New Year's Eve. I seem to be serializing every New Year's Eve and writing every New Year's Eve. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8968875/1096888752. HTML Genius remembered the website address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 483. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are available here. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng entered the governor's residence in the afternoon, but the governor did not return until evening. Advisor who asked the kitchen to prepare dinner, and he personally brought it over. Since Gu Qingfeng was with Gu Jiao, advisor who also brought the food to this room. At this moment, Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng both took off their masks. When he saw Gu Qingfeng, advisor who only thought that this official was born with good looks, but he was too young. Why would Empress Dowager Zhuang send such a young man to the frontier fortress? Then he saw Gu Jiao at the side. Advisor who was stunned by the birthmark on Gu Jiao's face. Was the imperial court so careless with its personnel? Gu Qingfeng took in all of advisor who's reactions. He didn't care when advisor who was sizing him up, but when advisor who stared at Gu Jiao with such a strange gaze, it made him angry for no reason. His expression turned cold. Is there anything else, advisor who? No. Teacher who came back to his senses in an instant, and sensed the displeasure of the other party. He smiled sheepishly and took 2 steps forward with the tray. My lords, this is your dinner. I'll put it here for you. As he spoke, he respectfully placed the tray on the table in front of the two of them. Along the way, Gu Qingfeng and Gu Jiao had spent many nights in the open. They had been to rich cities and barren towns. The further north they went, the colder the weather was, and the harder the life of the people seemed to be. But he did not expect that the food in the governor's residence would be so bad. After all, he was the highest-ranking official in the region. Gu Qingfeng looked at the wretched-looking cornbread, 2 boiled eggs, and a plate of pickled vegetables in the bowl. He was dumbfounded. As if sensing Gu Qingfeng's confusion, advisor who smiled awkwardly and said, The frontier fortress is a bitter and cold place. It cannot be compared to the capital. I hope my lords will forgive us. Even the governor's residence is so poor? Gu Qingfeng could not help but ask. Wasn't there a saying among the common people that 3 years of being an honest magistrate is worth 100,000 snowflakes of silver? There were only poor commoners in the world. How could there be poor officials? Advisor who lowered his head and sighed helplessly. Sirs, you may not know this, but Yuegu City is poor and the people don't have enough to eat. The prefect was born in a poor family, and loves the people as if they were his own children. His salary has been used to provide relief to the victims of the disaster. He usually eats whatever the people eat. Today, in order to entertain the 2 sirs, he dug out the eggs and pickles that he is only willing to eat during the new year. There's meat in the pickles. The last sentence was the finishing touch. Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched. There was meat inside? The kind with diced meat? Thinking of something, Gu Qingfeng asked. The imperial court allocates funds to the frontier fortress every year. Where does it go? Advisor who sighed again. Our ancient moon city is just a small city. We don't get much money, and all of it has been used up. The governor doesn't take a single cent from the commoners, nor does he take a single cent from the imperial court. Gu Qingfeng was silent. Forget it. He was a bandit. Why should he care about the commoners? The purpose of his trip was to save his grandfather. Everything else had nothing to do with him. Advisor who observed the situation and said, Sirs, please enjoy your meal. I'll take my leave. Gu Qingfeng waved his hand lightly. After advisor who left, Gu Qingfeng picked up a cornbread. It was probably hot when he took it out of the pot, but it was already cold by the time he brought it over. It was as stiff as a rock. Gu Qingfeng took a bite. It tasted so bad that he frowned. He said to Gu Jiao, "If Princess Ning knew that she would marry into such a place, she probably wouldn't have come to the frontier fortress, right?" "I don't know," Gu Jiao said. Gu Qingfeng pursed his lips in disdain. She always had a way to end the conversation. He looked disdainful, but he was very careful when he picked out the cornbread for Gu Jiao. He peeled off the dried outer skin and put it in his bowl. The warm and soft core was placed in Gu Jiao's bowl. He also carefully picked out the pickled vegetables for a long time before picking out the diced meat and giving it to Gu Jiao. He wasn't so natural in the beginning. The first time was at the first relay station after leaving the capital. At that time, the food wasn't bad. They actually ate a plate of prawns. He was used to taking care of his younger brother, so he peeled one for Gu Jiao. When he put it on Gu Jiao's plate, he felt that something was wrong. Gu Jiao wasn't his younger brother or sister. He wouldn't admit it. The most awkward thing wasn't that he peeled the prawns for Gu Jiao, but that if Gu Jiao suddenly asked, "Why are you so nice to me?" Unexpectedly, Gu Jiao didn't say a word. She didn't even lift her eyelids, as if this action wasn't out of line and didn't matter. This made Gu Qingfeng secretly sigh in relief. After that, he unconsciously did something similar a few times. She always accepted it calmly. If he didn't do it, she wouldn't ask him why. Gu Qingfeng felt that this girl wasn't very difficult to get along with. Or more accurately, she was very easy to get along with. Even Gu Jinyu in the residence wasn't so easy to get along with. Gu Jinyu was too fragile and needed someone to protect her at all times. Otherwise, she would be sad and cry. Gu Jiao wasn't like that. She only knew how to make others cry. After dinner, Gu Qingfeng said to Gu Jiao, "I'm going to Yi City tomorrow to save grandfather. What are your plans?" The remnants of the previous dynasty were stationed in Yi City. His grandfather and Princess Ning had also been captured there. Yi City was the most heavily guarded of the three cities. Not only were there remnants of the previous dynasty, but also the Qin Kingdom's army. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. If he wanted to use his own strength to save his grandfather, the chances of success were slim. But he had to do this. That was his grandfather. Even if Yi City was a mountain of daggers and a sea of flames, he had to charge in. Gu Qingfeng suddenly remembered why Gu Jiao had come to the fortress. He asked her, "You said that your brother was also captured. Is he also in Yi City?" "No," Gu Jiao said. Gu Qingfeng's expression relaxed. "It's good that he's not in Yi City. Yi City's situation is the most complicated. Don't act on your own for now. Wait until I go to Yi City to save grandfather. Then I'll go with you to save your brother." Gu Jiao took a sip of water with sand in it and said slowly, "Okay." Princess Ning and the old duke had been secretly moved away long ago. Right now they weren't in Yi City at all. Yi City was an empty nest that Gu Qingfeng couldn't return from. After Gu Qingfeng returned to his room, Gu Jiao also went to sleep. In the middle of the night, she heard a very slight movement on the roof. Her ears twitched and she opened her eyes coldly. In that dream, Gu Qingfeng was staying at an inn. On the first night, he was drugged. The next day, when he went to Yi City to save someone, he suddenly lost all his strength and fell into the enemy's trap. It seemed that the governor's manor's defenses weren't very effective. What should come still came. There were 3 people in total. Gu Jiao looked at the roof. She lifted the blanket and sat up. She heard them go next door. She waited for them to come out so that they could come to her side and die. But they just left. Wait. She came with Gu Qingfeng. Didn't they drug her as well? Or did they only want to deal with Gu Qingfeng from the beginning? No. Gu Qingfeng and the old marquis had their heads cut off, Gu Chongqing's legs were cut off, and the Gu family army was annihilated. This was not targeted at Gu Qingfeng, but at the Gu family and the Gu family army. She hid her identity and didn't reveal the fact that she was the Gu family's daughter. Thus, the enemy didn't count her in. Gu Jiao's eyes turned cold. She pushed open the door and went to Gu Qingfeng's room. She kicked the door open and walked in to extinguish the sleeping incense on the windowsill. Gu Qingfeng was awakened by the loud noise. He sat up with a dagger in his hand. "Who is it?" He looked at Gu Jiao and frowned. "It's you. Let's go." Gu Jiao said calmly. What for? Gu Qingfeng asked. Gu Jiao threw the extinguished sleeping incense out of the windowsill. Didn't you want to save someone? Gu Qingfeng followed her movements and looked. What did you just throw away? Gu Jiao took out a handkerchief and wiped her hands. Sleeping incense. Gu Qingfeng frowned. You gave me sleeping incense? Gu Jiao said calmly. Yes, I wanted to kill you. Gu Qingfeng's face darkened. Of course, he didn't believe that Gu Jiao would kill him. Therefore, the sleeping incense wasn't given by Gu Jiao. He looked at Gu Jiao and then at the door that she kicked open. His face darkened. Did someone come here just now? You're not too stupid. Gu Jiao kept the handkerchief and said. Gu Qingfeng's expression turned serious. He was Fei Shuang. Only he knew how alert he was. Gu Jiao said that they were targeted when they entered the city. At that time, he only thought that the other party was far away and he couldn't find them in time. However, tonight, the other party was right under his nose, and he didn't even notice. Gu Jiao walked out. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to catch up. At this point, it would be a bit pretentious to tell Gu Jiao that she didn't need to take the risk with him. Gu Qingfeng's expression turned serious. He lifted the blanket and got out of bed. They had been sleeping in the open all this time. They slept with their clothes on. After getting out of bed, he grabbed his sword and quietly left the governor's office with Gu Jiao. In order not to be noticed by the three people, they followed them from a distance. At this moment, the two of them were hiding on a roof. Gu Qingfeng looked at the three people who were relieving themselves in front of him. He raised his hand and covered Gu Jiao's eyes. Gu Jiao was speechless. Thank you. I wasn't interested anyway. Gu Qingfeng whispered. Do you think they're remnants of the previous dynasty or masters of the Qin kingdom? Remnants of the previous dynasty, Gu Jiao said without hesitation. Are you sure? Gu Qingfeng was surprised. Gu Jiao nodded. She had thought about it carefully just now. The remnants of the previous dynasty had colluded with the Qin kingdom's army. It looked like they were all working together, but in reality, they all had their own goals. For example, it seemed like the Qin kingdom's army's idea to let the 100,000 Gu clan soldiers never return. And it seemed more like the remnants of the previous dynasty's plan to deal with the Gu clan's grandfather and grandson. She didn't know how the Gu clan had offended the remnants of the previous dynasty for them to take such savage revenge. Actually, Gu Qingfeng also felt that it was more likely the remnants of the previous dynasty. After all, his grandfather had fallen into the hands of the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Qingfeng continued. Princess Ning'an's son-in-law is also a remnant of the previous dynasty. And according to the information I gathered from the Qianji Pavilion, he's also a member of the previous dynasty's imperial family. Gu Jiao didn't know about this. After the three of them finished relieving themselves, Gu Qingfeng removed the hand covering Gu Jiao's eyes and continued chasing with Gu Jiao. As he chased, he felt that something was wrong. That doesn't seem to be the direction to Yi City. He had studied the map several times before going to bed. If they walked along this official road, they would reach Yi City if they headed east and Lingguan City if they headed west. They're going to Lingguan City. Gu Qingfeng sucked in a cold breath of air suspiciously. Why are they going to Lingguan City? Shouldn't they be going to Yi City? Could it be they've secretly moved their base? Gu Qingfeng wasn't stupid. After thinking for a while, he figured out the crux of the matter. If that was really the case, then his grandfather definitely wasn't in Yi City. He had gone through so much trouble to rush over, only to end up empty-handed. Empty-handed was secondary. Those people had drugged him and moved their base. They had probably already set up a trap in Yi City. Gu Qingfeng's face was filled with shock. So I'm just sending my head to them. Gu Jiao cast a sidelong glance at him and silently clapped her hands in her heart. Congratulations, you're right. The two of them chased for half the night. When it was close to daybreak, those three people finally stopped. Instead, they took the medallion and entered a residence. It's the Lingguan City governor's residence. Gu Qingfeng lay on the eaves of a building and turned his head to whisper to Gu Jiao behind him. Lingguan City had fallen, and the governor's residence had long since fallen into the hands of the remnants of the previous dynasty and the Qin kingdom's army. The governor's residence was heavily guarded. Judging from their armor, there were both Qin Kingdom soldiers and remnants of the previous dynasty's army. Could grandfather have been locked up here? Gu Qingfeng muttered. Gu Jiao thought he was asking her and replied, I'm not sure. She hadn't dreamed of this detail. She only knew that Gu Qingfeng and the old marquis had been beheaded in Lingguan City. Their heads had also been hung on the city walls. The newest chapter of this book isn't finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels will be updated even faster. Millions of novels to read for free. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_8964286/10966787 HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Biku Pavilion's mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. Chapter 484. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that cannot be found online are all available here. After the war, Lingguan City was devastated. There were more soldiers than civilians on the streets. Innocent civilians could be seen being taken away for no reason from time to time. Gu Qingfeng reminded himself again and again that he was a bandit, and that the lives of civilians had nothing to do with him. However, when he saw these things happen in front of him, the blood in his body still surged with anger. He clenched his fists tightly. It took a great deal of effort to resist the urge to kill those Chun soldiers who bullied civilians. He could not expose himself. It was not time yet. Not time yet. Let's find an inn. He turned around, afraid that if he looked any longer, he would not be able to resist charging over. Okay. Gu Jiao nodded calmly. She seemed to be indifferent to everything. The lives of others were not worth mentioning in her eyes. However, she had traveled thousands of miles to this dangerous and bitter cold place for the idiot and brother she spoke of. Gu Qingfeng suddenly felt that he could not understand her. The two of them found an inn nearby. The inn had signs of being robbed. The shopkeeper's face had a shocking palm print. As for the workers in the inn, they were either injured or in pain. Their eyes were red and swollen. They were picking up the chairs that had fallen on the ground. There were no other guests in the inn. They did not know if no one was staying, or if they had all been scared away. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng came to the counter. The innkeeper pulled himself together and looked at the two of them. His voice was still trembling after choking with sobs. Are you two guests eating or staying? Gu Qingfeng said to the shopkeeper. Give us a room. If there's food, send it up. If there isn't, then forget it. The two of you, please follow me. The shopkeeper held back his grief and brought Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng to the second floor. He pointed to a room that could be considered clean and tidy. This is our inn's best room. 100 copper coins a night, including 2 meals. 100 copper coins. Gu Qingfeng suspected that he had heard wrong. The shopkeeper hurriedly said, Do you think it's expensive? In that case, I can give you a discount. How about 80 copper coins? Gu Qingfeng opened his mouth. That's not what I meant. 100 copper coins was really too cheap. They had never stayed in such a cheap inn on their way here. Moreover, it was the best room with 2 meals included. 100 copper coins it is. Gu Qingfeng couldn't bear to see the shopkeeper lose, so he didn't raise the price. The shopkeeper said gratefully, Thank you, sir. Then I will go and prepare the food for you, but you may have to wait for a while. Gu Qingfeng understood what he meant. Those soldiers had ransacked the inn, so they probably didn't even let go of the good stuff in the kitchen. They had to go buy groceries again. Gu Qingfeng had mixed feelings. Gu Jiao continued to eat and sleep as if she didn't have a care in the world. There wasn't the slightest bit of annoyance or pity on her face. The corner of Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched as he looked at a certain someone who was sleeping soundly on the bed while hugging her red-tasseled spear. How could a little girl's heart be bigger than a man's? After dinner, The two were ready to set off. The two of them changed into their night suits, put on their masks and prepared to set off. Unexpectedly, as soon as Gu Qingfeng opened the door, he immediately closed it again. "Someone's here?" Gu Jiao asked. Gu Qingfeng's throat moved. He composed himself and said, "It's the Chun Nation's soldiers." A large group. A large group meant that there were dozens of them. They filled the inn's main hall almost instantly. For a moment, Gu Qingfeng suspected that he and Gu Jiao's whereabouts had been exposed. Fortunately, the group sat down in the main hall. It seemed that they were only here to freeload. Gu Qingfeng secretly sighed in relief. It wasn't that he was afraid of these soldiers. If they really fought, he could deal with them alone. However, if they really fought, it would be bad if they alerted the governor's office's soldiers. There were no windows in the room. They could only wait for the group of soldiers to leave. The group of soldiers didn't know that other people were staying in the inn. They even thought that everyone here was on their side. They didn't have any qualms about talking about it. They actually let Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng hear something incredible. It turned out that Tang Yueshan had something to do with the old duke's capture. The prince consort put Princess Ning under house arrest. The old duke asked Tang Yueshan to borrow some archers to sneak into the princess residence to save Princess Ning. However, Tang Yueshan refused the old duke's request, saying that he wanted to send troops to eliminate the rebels. The old duke had long sensed that something was wrong. He reminded Tang Yueshan that things weren't that simple, and that he shouldn't act rashly. Tang Yueshan thought that the old duke was preventing him from performing meritorious deeds. He didn't listen to the old duke's advice and stubbornly launched a night attack on the remnants of the previous dynasty. In the end, he fell into the enemy's trap. The remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chun Nation's army attacked from both sides. In the end, Tang Yueshan suffered a crushing defeat and Yi City was lost. The Chun Nation's army won the first battle. Their morale was high. On the other hand, the Zhao Nation's local army naturally didn't have much morale after seeing that the world's marshal had been defeated. They stubbornly resisted. Lingguan City and Beiyang City were easily taken by the Chun Nation's army. Gu Qingfeng said angrily, "If Tang Yueshan had listened to my grandfather wouldn't have been captured. The frontier fortress wouldn't have been lost so easily." If his grandfather hadn't been captured, whether his grandfather and Tang Yueshan had joined forces to fight the enemy, or if his grandfather had led the army after Tang Yueshan's defeat, the frontier fortress wouldn't have been lost so quickly. Gu Qingfeng frowned suspiciously. "Do you think Tang Yueshan did it on purpose?" "On purpose what?" Gu Jiao asked. Gu Qingfeng said coldly, "He lost on purpose so that my grandfather would be captured. As the saying goes, like son like father. If he could raise such a vicious and perverted son like Tang Ming, it's obvious that he's not a good person himself. Maybe he found out the truth about Tang Ming's death from somewhere, and hated the Gu family. Tang Ming bullied Gu Yan, and suffered from Gu Jiao's violent revenge. Gu Qingfeng was also involved. If Tang Yueshan knew the truth, he would have a reason to take revenge on the Gu family." Gu Jiao paused and didn't say anything. From the information revealed by the soldiers, Tang Yueshan disappeared after the defeat. Now they were searching everywhere for Tang Yueshan. If he was alive, they wanted to see him. If he was dead, they wanted to see his corpse. The more Gu Qingfeng thought about it, the more suspicious he felt Tang Yueshan was. Even the defeat of the army was very likely to be part of Tang Yueshan's scheme. He's a man who enjoys grandiose achievements. If he lost the city first and then took it back, His Majesty would see how difficult it was for him to fight this battle. When he returned to the capital, he would receive double the reward and the emperor's favor. Gu Jiao tapped his shoulder. Gu Qingfeng was in the middle of analyzing Tang Yueshan's situation. He was suddenly interrupted and was stunned. "What's wrong?" Gu Jiao pointed downstairs. "They're gone." Gu Qingfeng opened his mouth. "All right, let's go." Gu Jiao glanced at him and said, "You can continue when you come back." Gu Qingfeng choked. "I don't want to talk about it. I'm a man. Don't talk so much." The man was a man of few words. On the way to the governor's mansion, he chatted with Gu Jiao all the way. Gu Jiao. The governor's mansion was heavily guarded. But for Gu Qingfeng, who could come and go freely under the watch of the dragon shadow guards, it was not too difficult. He sneaked into the mansion with Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao took out the flamboyant peacock plume mask and put it on. Gu Qingfeng. No, what's the point of covering your face now? The two of them didn't know where the old duke was imprisoned. Gu Qingfeng decisively grabbed a soldier. Gu Jiao gave him a dose of drug, and the soldier fell asleep immediately. Gu Qingfeng looked at her syringe. Your drug doesn't work every time. Gu Jiao put away the syringe and said calmly, find it yourself. Gu Qingfeng snorted. How can we find such a big mansion? Do you want to find it until dawn? Gu Jiao clapped her hands indifferently. We've already searched the Ning prince's mansion. Why should we be afraid of a mere governor's mansion? Gu Qingfeng said disapprovingly. How can it be the same? The Ning prince's mansion only had a few storerooms, and they were all in his and Princess Consort Ning's courtyard. In front of the governor's mansion is the government office, and behind it is the private mansion. We don't know where they're keeping grandfather. It could be a woodshed, a dungeon, or a secret room. Before he finished speaking, Gu Jiao pushed open the door beside her. It was a wine cellar used to store fine wine. Gu Qingfeng shook his head. There was no need to look for such a place. It was not a good place to keep a hostage. His gaze swept across the room, and he was stunned. Ji grandfather? The old man with shackles on his hands and feet, covered in bruises and fainted on the ground, was none other than his grandfather. Gu Qingfeng was stunned. How? How did you know my grandfather was imprisoned here? Gu Jiao spread her hands. I don't know. I just randomly found it. Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched. What kind of luck did this girl have? She could even find him here. What happened to searching until dawn? What happened to the 100 ways he thought of to avoid detection by the Chen soldiers? Huh? Was there no place to use it? Digression. Happy New Year. May everyone be able to ride the waves like Jiao Jiao in 2021. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_8964226/1096666188. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. Chapter 485. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Qingfeng felt that the remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chen army must have been out of their minds to lock someone in a wine cellar. What the hell? Gu Jiao was about to enter the room. He raised his hand to stop Gu Jiao. Wait, I'll go in first. After learning that he had almost sent someone to their death, Gu Qingfeng became especially vigilant. He left Gu Jiao outside and went into the wine cellar to carefully inspect it. After confirming that there were no hidden traps or dangers, he said to Gu Jiao, "Come in." Gu Jiao entered the room and closed the door behind her. There were no windows in the wine cellar. Once the door was closed, the room became so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Gu Qingfeng took out a match. After lighting it, he went to the old marquee and knelt on the cold ground, reaching out to help the old marquee up. Wait! This time, it was Gu Jiao who stopped Gu Qingfeng's hand. The old marquis's breathing was very weak and shallow. He didn't look normal. As a doctor, she had an almost instinctive intuition about this situation. Gu Jiao took off the red tasseled spear on her back and placed it on the ground. Then she knelt down on one knee beside Gu Qingfeng and used the light of the match to see the old marquis's appearance. It wasn't enough to describe him as covered in cuts and bruises. He had clearly been brutally tortured. There wasn't a spot on his body that wasn't covered in blood. Bring the match closer, Gu Jiao said to Gu Qingfeng. Gu Chengfeng brought the match closer to him. The light from the fire could actually hide some of one's complexion. But even so, the old Marquis's paleness couldn't be hidden. Gu Chengfeng's heart clenched. His Adam's apple bobbed as he endured and called out in a small voice, "Grandfather, grandfather." The old Marquis didn't respond. Gu Chengfeng's heart clenched even tighter. Gu Jiao's expression did not change in the slightest. She calmly took off the old Marquis's clothes and began to check his injuries one by one. For Gu Chengfeng to be able to train to his current level, he naturally had his fair share of injuries and had seen others get injured. However, if the injured person was his own grandfather, he didn't dare to look down. He didn't know how this girl was able to remain so calm. After all, she wasn't Gu Jiao's real mother. To her, his grandfather was just an ordinary patient. The lighter wouldn't last long, and there wasn't enough light. Gu Jiao opened the small medicine box and took out a small emergency flashlight. She turned it on and handed it to Gu Chengfeng. "Light it." Gu Chengfeng was no longer surprised by her strange things. Wasn't it just a night-luminescent pearl? The only difference was that the light was longer and brighter. Gu Chengfeng extinguished the fire and turned on a small flashlight for Gu Jiao. "Is my grandfather seriously injured?" "Yes," Gu Jiao said. Her movements were very light, but she didn't miss a single bone. "He has both internal and external injuries. There are many comminuted fractures on his body." Gu Chengfeng was shocked. Broken into powder?" Gu Jiao sighed. "If it's broken into more than 3 pieces, it's called comminuted fractures." She didn't say that it must have been broken into powder. It wasn't a bone crusher. In addition to the fractures, there were many whip wounds all over his body. The blood on his body was left by these whip wounds. These whip wounds looked scary, but they weren't the main cause of the old Marquis's loss of consciousness. Gu Jiao took out a sphygmomanometer and measured the old Marquis's blood pressure. Strange, why is his blood pressure so low? The reason for the old Marquis's loss of consciousness was found. It was hemorrhagic shock. However, the old Marquis's whip wounds were only superficial and mottled with blood. In fact, the total amount of bleeding was not large. "Internal bleeding?" Gu Jiao murmured and narrowed her eyes. Gu Chengfeng didn't understand a single word she said. Even if he understood, he felt that it might not be what he understood. Gu Jiao took a pair of gloves from the small medicine box and put them on. Then she took out a long needle. Gu Chengfeng's eyebrows twitched. What was this girl doing now? After watching Gu Jiao suture Gu Chenglin's surgery, Gu Chengfeng hadn't eaten a single bite of meat for half a year. Gu Chengfeng's psychological trauma had just recovered. He couldn't let this girl poison his little heart. He decisively turned his face away. "Hey," Gu Jiao called him. "I'm not scared," he said sternly. "The flashlight is crooked," Gu Jiao reminded him. "Crooked? Where is it crooked?" Gu Chengfeng didn't dare to look back. Gu Jiao pulled his hand and moved the flashlight forward. "Don't move." Gu Chengfeng. "Okay." Gu Jiao performed a peritoneal puncture on the old Marquis. The blood extracted was not coagulated, which meant that the patient had bloody ascites. Combined with his injuries, it should be a substantial organ rupture. Gu Jiao put away the needle and quietly looked at the old Marquis's abdomen. Then, she began to gently press down along the direction of his ribs. When she pressed on the upper left abdomen, his body spasmed slightly. He didn't completely lose consciousness. He could still feel a little pain. That should be where the problem was. Gu Jiao's eyes turned cold. This place was the spleen. "Are you done with the examination? If you are, let's hurry up and get my grandfather out of here. I feel that it's not safe here. Those people might come back at any time. We can't leave." Gu Jiao said, "He's injured. Can't we go back to the inn to heal? I know that injured people can't be moved easily. I'll go get a stretcher. I won't let his injury worsen." Gu Jiao looked at the blood pressure that was still falling and shook her head. "We can't wait." "What do you mean by can't wait?" Gu Chengfeng turned around and looked at her with a stunned expression. Gu Jiao said, "He needs surgery." Gu Chengfeng was startled again. Here? Gu Jiao nodded solemnly. "Here." Seeing that Gu Chengfeng was very hesitant, she added, If we don't do the surgery immediately, he will die. Gu Chengfeng and Gu Jiao had been together for so long. Of course, he knew that this girl liked to ask for a lot of money when receiving medical fees. She never exaggerated about anything else. Gu Chengfeng looked at Gu Jiao deeply. Are you sure you want to do this? He didn't need to remind her how risky the surgery was in the enemy's territory. She was saving his grandfather, but she was also risking her own life. He continued, once we are discovered, the three of us may not be able to leave. Gu Jiao took out the scalpel without hesitation. I'll do it as soon as possible. Why are you doing this? Do you recognize him as your grandfather? No. Gu Jiao opened the scalpel. He's not my grandfather, but it's my duty to do anything for my brother. She was serious about becoming his sworn brother. Gu Chengfeng, who had completely misunderstood, felt his heart ache and was moved. It turned out that in her heart he was her brother. Gu Jiao, you think too much. You are not my brother. The one lying on the ground is. Do you need me to do anything? Gu Chengfeng asked righteously. Gu Jiao decided not to argue with him about seniority for the time being. She took out the scalpel and anesthetic. Find something to block the crack of the door. Don't let any light pass. There was no rag in the wine cellar, so Gu Chengfeng tore off his underwear and cut it into strips with a dagger to block the crack of the door. It was cold in the frontier fortress and there was no Kong in the wine cellar. In order to prevent the old duke from hypothermia during the operation, Gu Jiao asked Gu Chengfeng to dismantle the table, pour some spirits on it, and make a small fire. Snowflakes began to fall from the sky, hitting the eaves and the ground with a pitter-patter, perfectly covering the sound of the burning firewood. Gu Jiao's movements were very light and her expression was very calm. She put the old duke on an intravenous drip and asked Gu Chengfeng to find a shelf to hang the bottle. The old duke was bleeding badly, so it was not convenient to use epidural anesthesia. Gu Jiao gave him general anesthesia. The old marquis's last shred of consciousness disappeared, and he fell into a deep sleep. The conditions at the scene were not suitable for using surgical drapes. Gu Jiao disinfected a large area of the old duke's body, and directly made a cut on his upper left abdomen. Blood and ascites flowed out of the wound. Gu Chengfeng even held his breath. Gu Jiao completely separated the spleen and smoothly lifted it out of the incision. Gu Chengfeng only took one look, and almost fainted on the spot. Gu Jiao calmly continued the operation in front of her. She found the active bleeding point on the spleen and sutured it. If the bleeding still could not be stopped after suturing, she could only choose to remove part of the spleen or the whole spleen. The spleen was not the appendix, so it was fine to cut it off. The sequelae of splenectomy were lifelong. Once the operation was done, the old duke would never be able to go to the battlefield again. Time passed by slowly. The snowflakes outside had stopped at some point, and the governor's residence fell into complete silence. From time to time, there was a crackling sound from the fire. Every time there was a crackling sound, Gu Chengfeng's heart tightened. Gu Jiao devoted herself to her hands, which were already dripping with blood. The sutures were very effective. There was no need to remove the spleen. She only needed to suture all the cracks. The spleen repair was completed and the operation was in the final stage. The next step was to suture the wound on the abdomen. Gu Chengfeng clenched his fists and silently prayed in his heart. Please don't let anyone come. Please don't let anyone come. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more complete. Millions of novels are free to read. There are all the novels that you can't find online here. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_896426/1096454117. HTML Genius memorized the website address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Bikago mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. Chapter 486. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are read for free. There are novels with connotations that cannot be found online here. This courtyard was very remote. Usually no one would come here. As long as there was not much commotion in the wine cellar, it would not attract the patrolling guards. Yet, there were people who came. From the sound of footsteps and armor rubbing against each other, it was 2 adult soldiers. Generally speaking, this governor's office was controlled by the remnants of the previous dynasty. The Chun army was mainly stationed outside the governor's office. Thus, Gu Chengfeng deduced that these 2 were the minions of the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Chengfeng quietly came behind the door. He could not see the situation outside clearly. He could only try his best to pay attention to the movements and sounds of the people coming. At this time, Gu Jiao had already started to suture the abdominal wound. Seeing this, Gu Chengfeng understood that the surgery was almost done. However, the closer it was to the end, the more important it was to not make any mistakes. Gu Chengfeng's heart was slightly raised. The 2 soldiers entered the courtyard and walked toward the wine cellar. One of them pulled his companion and said, "Okay, there is no one else here. Take it out. Lower your voice. Don't let anyone hear you." His companion said in a low voice. Okay. I won't say it loudly." The soldier's voice was lower, but his tone was more urgent. "Don't just talk to me in a low voice. Where is the thing I asked you to bring? Take it out." Hearing this, Gu Chengfeng understood that the 2 were not here to check on his grandfather. His heart sank back into his stomach. However, he did not dare to be careless. He still held the 2 hidden weapons tightly in his hands. His companion took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to the soldier. "Here." The soldier pulled out the stopper and sniffed the bottle. His tone was somewhat disgusted. "What is this smell? It's all the same smell. Is it really effective? Won't you know if it is effective after you try it? Then have you tried it yourself? Can you really do it 7 times in one night?" Hearing this, Gu Chengfeng could not help but frown. What 7 times in one night? There were too many dirty words. He really wanted to shut their mouths. He turned back to look at Gu Jiao, who was treating the old duke. Gu Jiao was almost done. This girl was treating him so seriously. She didn't hear those dirty words, did she? "Just tell me whether you want it or not." Yes. How could he not want it? "How much?" "It sold for 1 tael of silver outside. The boss is my friend, so he gave it to me at a cheaper price of 200 copper coins. If I were to sell it to someone else, I would have to pay an additional 50 copper coins. You're my brother, so based on our friendship, I won't charge you more." Gu Chengfeng sneered in his heart. This kind of despicable thing was already expensive for 10 copper coins. How could they be brothers? In the end, the soldier decided to be a sucker and spent 200 copper coins to buy the bottle of all-aspect nourishment pills. "Let's go," the soldier said to his companion. "Wait. What happened? Over there. What's going on over there?" The soldier looked around and asked. "Oh, the wine cellar." Gu Chengfeng's heart tightened. "I heard that Lingguan City's governor's office's wine is new or red, which has been stored for more than 10 years. His companion walked towards the wine cellar as he spoke. The soldier pulled him back. "Hey, who was the one who said not to be discovered? You're hugging a wine jar in the middle of the night. Do you think you're not discovered fast enough? If you want to drink wine, I have plenty in my house. I'll give you a jar when we get back." All right." His companion was convinced by the soldier and left the courtyard with him. Gu Chengfeng finally let out a sigh of relief. His entire back was soaked in cold sweat and his forehead was sticky. He raised a hand to wipe his sweat and asked Gu Jiao, "Is it done?" Gu Jiao cut off the last thread and used gauze to cover the wound. "Not yet. The fracture needs to be fixed. The old marquis's 4 limbs were fractured and needed to be stopped first. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous to move." Half of the table was thrown into the fire. There was still half left. Gu Jiao first made do with cutting a few boards. Gu Chengfeng went over to help her. But at this time, something unexpected happened. The 2 people who had already left actually turned back in a hurry. "Not good. It's Captain Liu. If he finds out that we didn't patrol properly and came here without permission, he will definitely punish us. It was that soldier's voice. "Hurry and hide," his companion said. "Where do we hide?" the soldier asked fearfully. "The wine cellar." Gu Qingfeng's eyebrows jumped. His hand that was fixing the boards paused. He instinctively glanced at Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao acted as if she didn't hear anything and calmly and quickly continued what she was doing. Gu Qingfeng's eyes moved, and he looked coldly in the direction of the door. "Why can't the door be opened? Is it locked from the inside?" "Impossible, let me do it." The soldier's companion pushed open the door with great force, and a flash of fire suddenly entered his eyes. He was slightly startled, but before he could react to why there was fire inside, Gu Qingfeng shot out 2 concealed weapons. His body stiffened and he fell forward. He didn't fall to the ground. Gu Qingfeng's figure flashed in front of him and caught him. Everything happened in a flash. The soldier didn't have time to react. Gu Qingfeng's other hidden weapon cut his throat. Gu Qingfeng caught the 2 of them one by one, and dragged them into the house without a trace. He quickly and steadily closed the door without making a single sound. Gu Qingfeng placed the 2 corpses on the ground. He sat on the side, leaning against the door behind him as he trembled and panted. He was a thief, not an assassin. No matter how many times he killed someone, he couldn't get used to it. But he couldn't not kill them. Captain Lu led a group of patrolling soldiers as they walked past the courtyard. Gu Qingfeng held his breath and minimized his presence to the minimum. Gu Jiao finished cutting all the wooden boards. Next, they only needed to fix them so that they wouldn't make too much noise. But as luck would have it, the old marquis showed signs of waking up. While he was in a daze, he coughed out of the blue. "What's that sound?" In response to Lord Lu, "It seems to be coming from the wine cellar. There's a hostage in the wine cellar." "Captain Lu. Is it the old marquis of the Gu army?" "Subordinate. It's him. He was interrogated this afternoon and was injured." "Captain Lu. Why is he in the wine cellar?" "This." The subordinate smiled embarrassedly. Why was he locked in the wine cellar and not the dungeon? Wasn't it because someone had disobeyed the orders of the higher-ups and lynched the old marquis? They were afraid that they would be discovered in the dungeon, so they locked him in the wine cellar first. Captain Lu wasn't stupid and quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He was only a small captain and couldn't afford to offend the person who lynched the old marquis. But he was on duty tonight. If something happened to the hostage, he couldn't escape the blame. "Go and see how he is," he ordered. The 2 subordinates walked towards the wine cellar together. At this time, Gu Jiao finished fixing the old marquis's left arm and started fixing his right arm. Gu Qingfeng took a deep breath and closed his eyes. What was to come still came. Gu Qingfeng didn't give the 2 a chance to push the door open. He rushed out and shot 2 hidden weapons at the 2 soldiers in front of him. "Assassin!" Captain Lu pulled out the sword at his waist and led the rest of his subordinates to rush towards Gu Qingfeng. This group of people, including Captain Lu, were just ordinary soldiers. They weren't very skilled and Gu Qingfeng didn't feel much pressure dealing with them. However, Captain Lu seemed to have noticed that Gu Qingfeng was skilled. He didn't hesitate to blow the wooden whistle at his waist. A tall and powerful figure flew through the air and kicked Gu Qingfeng in the chest. Gu Qingfeng fell heavily at the door of the wine cellar and spat out a mouthful of blood. Gu Qingfeng clutched his chest. He recognized that this man in black was one of the masters that he and Gu Jiao had been tracking. He also had companions. They also descended from the sky and blocked the door to the courtyard. No wonder he didn't notice when they drugged him. His skills were almost on par with His Majesty's dragon shadow guards. Gu Qingfeng held his chest in pain with one hand and used his other hand to support his body with the sword. He stood up with a fierce look in his eyes. "Archers, get ready!" Captain Lu yelled. A row of archers filed in and knelt on one knee. They drew their bows and aimed at Gu Qingfeng. The marquis, whose right leg was fixed, seemed to have sensed that something was about to happen to his grandson. He opened his eyes slightly and tilted his head to look outside the door. He had been unconscious for too long and his vision was a little blurry. He could only vaguely see a familiar figure stubbornly holding the long sword in his hand and guarding the people in the room. The marquis's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. Gu Qingfeng didn't know how many times he had been kicked down by the master in black. Every time he fell, He would spit out a mouthful of blood. However, he would always stand up again. The master in black seemed to be tired of it. After knocking Gu Chengfeng down for the last time, he stepped on Gu Chengfeng's chest with his long boot. He gestured to another master in black. His companion understood and strode towards the wine cellar. Gu Chengfeng grabbed a hidden weapon in his palm. However, before he could shoot it, his hand was stepped on by the man in black. It was time to end everything. The master in black lifted his icy cold boot and ruthlessly stepped on Gu Chengfeng's head. Heavy snow suddenly fell from the sky. Snowflakes fluttered down. Ah! A sharp scream. The master in black outside the wine cellar was dragged in by a strong force. Almost at the same time, a red tasseled spear suddenly shot out from the wine cellar, carrying a trembling sound of breaking through the air. It pierced through the flying snow, and with a whoosh, it pierced through the heart of the black-clothed expert, sending him flying and fiercely nailing him to the hard wall. Everyone was stunned. In the next second, they all looked towards the wine cellar. They didn't know when, but there was a slender little figure at the door. In the sky full of flying snow, a young man with long hair like ink, eyes cold and murderous, like an Azura from hell. Digression. Just ask if Jiao Jiao is handsome or not. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels that can't be found online are all here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964286/1096444184. HTML Genius will remember this site's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikaga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 487. The newest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated even faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. The youth's fair and slender right hand was carrying a person. It was the other black-clothed expert that had been caught and thrown into the wine cellar. He had long since lost his breath and was thrown into the snow in the courtyard by the youth like a sack. The youth's throw was not very strong, but it made everyone feel an unbridled, irreverent, insolent and arrogant aura. No one knew how the youth did it. Just now, their attention was all on the first black-clothed expert. They were watching him stomp on Gu Chengfeng's head until it exploded. This was a bloody, ruthless scene that made one's blood spurt out. When the second black-clothed expert went to the wine cellar to look for someone, everyone only heard a scream. They didn't even think that the scream came from their own expert. They thought that their own expert had quickly entered the room and caught the assassin's accomplice. The scream came from the assassin's accomplice. And now, of their own 2 experts, one was impaled by a spear and nailed to the wall, the other was crushed to death by the youth and thrown to the ground. This scene was simply too shocking and too strange. Everyone's voices were stuck in their throats. Even their breathing unconsciously stopped. Only Gu Chengfeng was lying in a puddle of blood mixed with snow. His body suddenly relaxed. Was this girl finally done with the operation? He thought that he wouldn't be able to wait. It's good that she's out. It's good that she's out. Gu Chengfeng coughed up blood while his body trembled. He smiled as if relieved of a burden. More than half of the 3 black-clothed experts were killed in an instant. The third black-clothed expert was the first to recover from his shock. He pulled out the soft sword at his waist and attacked Gu Jiao with a murderous aura. When dealing with Gu Chengfeng, he didn't make a move because there was no need to. But this youth killed 2 of his companions as soon as he came out. Even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that this youth who was much younger than everyone present gave him a strong sense of danger. So much so that he even used his weapon. Gu Jiao dealt with all changes by remaining unchanged. When he attacked her, she did not immediately move. Instead, the moment his soft sword was about to strangle her neck, she raised her left hand and shot out a long thread with a hook to entangle the other's soft sword. Then, she pulled hard and used the force to throw herself out. As if she had qigong, She soared into the air and shuttled through the flying snow. She stepped on the opposite wall and pulled out the red tasseled spear with her bare hands. She nimbly turned around, and at the same time, flipped the red tasseled spear in her palm. The spearhead aimed at the last black-clothed expert, and mercilessly shot over. There were no fancy moves, and it was impossible to tell which school of kung fu it was from. But killing was done in an instant. Perhaps when the old Marquis taught her spear techniques, he did not expect her to be able to turn every move into such a fierce killing move. The third black-robed man didn't even have time to fight back. His entire body stiffened, and he fell to his knees with a plop. Heavy snow fell, and his head lowered, no longer making a sound. Gu Jiao pulled out her spear, and he also fell to the ground. Captain Liu and all the other soldiers couldn't help but take a big step back. This youth was too scary. It wasn't true that his kung fu was high, but his murderous intent was something that even death soldiers couldn't match. The strong were afraid of the strong, and the strong were afraid of those who didn't care about their lives. And this youth was precisely that kind of person who didn't care about his life. Gu Jiao was still wearing that coquettish peacock plume mask. Coupled with her murderous intent, she gave off an inexplicable sense of strangeness. For a moment, no one dared to step forward to catch her. Gu Jiao came in front of Gu Chengfeng, holding the red tasseled spear. She looked down at him from above. "Can you still walk?" Gu Chengfeng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and panted. "Yes." "Oh." Gu Jiao nodded and reached out her hand. Gu Chengfeng suddenly. "Wait, if I can't walk, are you planning to leave me here?" Gu Chengfeng pulled Gu Jiao's hand and stood up from the snow. Captain Liu and the others glared at Gu Jiao, but they didn't dare to actually catch Gu Jiao. Instead, wherever Gu Jiao went, the soldiers would tremble and take a few steps back. This really scared Gu Jiao silly. It wasn't until Gu Jiao walked back to the wine cellar and carried the unconscious old duke out that Captain Liu finally reacted. Fighting Gu Jiao was courting death, but if they let Gu Jiao go, it would be difficult for them to escape death if they were to be held responsible. Captain Liu gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He raised his sword and said, "Are you all cowards? Are you all scared out of your wits by a brat who's still wet behind the ears? If we let them go today, none of us will be able to live when His Excellency pursues this matter. 2 of the 3 of them are already injured. That brat is carrying another one on his back. He won't be able to deal with us. Attack together. Chop them up. Attack together. Chop them up." Some of the soldiers agreed passionately. Captain Liu took the lead and charged out. When he and the other soldiers saw this, they were also filled with bloodlust. It was mainly because they saw that Gu Jiao was carrying an injury on her back and really thought that she was at her wit's end. Little did they know that Gu Jiao had tied the old duke tightly to her back with strips of cloth. She freed up 2 hands, one gripping her spear tightly while the other tossed the small basket on her back to Gu Chengfeng. Then she waved her hand and threw out the black fire pearl, blasting a path of blood. The huge commotion shocked the entire governor's office. Even the Chun soldiers stationed outside the office were alarmed by the series of loud noises. However, Gu Jiao and Gu Chengfeng moved extremely quickly. By the time a large number of soldiers arrived to surround them, they had already jumped over the wall of the governor's office and mounted the horses that had been hidden nearby. There were 2 horses in total. Gu Jiao rode one with the old duke, while Gu Chengfeng rode the other horse alone. The 3 quickly disappeared from the streets of Lingguan City. "Sir." Near the wine cellar, Captain Liu, who had been severely injured by the explosion, knelt down and bowed to a man wearing a silver fox cloak. The man was about 30 years old. He was tall and sturdy, with cold features and deep eyes. His every movement was filled with nobility. He didn't look angry, but everyone who was still alive felt as if their throats were being strangled, and they couldn't breathe. The man did not pay any attention to Captain Liu, who was kneeling on the ground, nor did he pay any attention to the other soldiers who had been blown up. He only came to the remains of the black fire pearl and squatted down. He touched the remains with his slender fingers, and a trace of coldness and doubt flashed across his face. "Yin Kingdom," he muttered. Captain Liu didn't hear what he said clearly. It wasn't that his voice was too soft, but that his ears were muddled from the explosion. He asked, Sir, should we chase? Chase, the man in the silver fox cloak said calmly. I want him alive. Ah, that brat was so powerful. It was already difficult to kill him, but to capture him alive wasn't this. Captain Liu wanted to say that he was making things too difficult for the soldiers, but he also understood that this lord would never take back his words. They either had to obey or die. The cold wind whistled and snow swirled in the air. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng ran endlessly in the night against the flying snow. Their hands and feet were frozen, and their bodies were gradually losing feeling. Gu Jiao's long eyelashes were covered in frost. However, thanks to the heavy snow, their whereabouts were concealed. Gu Qingfeng wanted to ask where Gu Jiao was going, but his mouth was numb from the cold, and he couldn't open his mouth at all. Just as the three of them were about to turn into three small popsicles, Gu Jiao finally stopped the horse. The moment she grabbed the reins and pulled, Gu Jiao's hand hurt so much that it felt like it was broken. Proud arrived. Proud arrived? Gu Qingfeng immediately blurted out. Gu Jiao responded. She wasn't much better than Gu Qingfeng, and had a hard time talking. She slowly loosened her stiff hand, but the reins were already frozen in her palm. The red-tasseled spear wasn't frozen in her hand, but she had held on to it for too long and couldn't open her stiff fingers for a while. The two of them used a lot of energy to get off the horse. The horse was exhausted and was panting heavily. Where are we? Gu Qingfeng asked with a pale face. I don't know. Gu Jiao wasn't familiar with the terrain of the frontier fortress. She was only relying on her intuition to avoid the pursuers of the previous dynasty. Let's walk forward and see, she said. She raised her hand that had regained a bit of feeling and grabbed the horse's stiff hand. Her other hand grabbed her red-tasseled spear. Gu Qingfeng remembered that she originally carried the red-tasseled spear on her back, but now that she was carrying her grandfather, she could only hold the red-tasseled spear in her hand. Give it to me. He reached out his hand and said, You won't be able to carry it. Gu Jiao said. How can I not be able to carry it? I'm a man. The belittled Gu Qingfeng raised his hand to take Gu Jiao's red-tasseled spear. Gu Jiao glanced at him indifferently and let go. Fuck. Gu Qingfeng knelt on the ground and couldn't help but curse. What kind of red-tasseled spear is this? Why is it so heavy? Also, he didn't look carefully just now because he was running for his life. Now that he looked carefully, his heart almost stopped beating. How could there be such an ugly red-tasseled spear in this world? Were the big red flowers on the spear serious? Also, who had braided the red tassels into pigtails? Gu Qingfeng almost cried because of the ugliness. Carrying this red-tasseled spear on the battlefield, it was so ugly that it could kill a bunch of enemies. Fortunately, she used cloth to wrap the red-tasseled spear on the way, or else Gu Qingfeng seriously suspected that he would be blinded by the ugliness. I already said you can't carry it. Gu Jiao automatically ignored the disdain and shock in Gu Qingfeng's eyes. She grabbed the red-tasseled spear and led the horse forward. I can't carry it because I'm injured. Gu Qingfeng decided to save his dignity as a man. Why don't you wait until I recover and see if I can carry it? Gu Jiao didn't turn around and waved her hand. You'll talk after you recover. Gu Qingfeng's face darkened, and he led his horse to follow. The two of them seemed to have entered a forest deep in the mountains, but they quickly passed through the forest again. There's a family over there. Gu Qingfeng said. Yes. Gu Jiao nodded. She also saw it. It didn't look like a normal villager's house, but more like a hunter's house. The two led their horses over. Even though Gu Qingfeng was injured, he still pulled Gu Jiao behind him and raised his hand to knock on the door. Gu Jiao said, No need to knock, there's no one. Gu Qingfeng frowned strangely. You heard it again? Did this girl have dog ears? Gu Jiao directly pushed open the door and walked in. This was a small wooden house with 2 rooms. The central room was connected to the bedroom, and there was a simple stove and cooking utensils in the corner of the central room. There was a bit of frozen leftovers in the pot. In this kind of climate, frozen leftovers wouldn't spoil for a month or 2. So Gu Jiao couldn't tell how many days this pot of leftovers was left. But judging from the dust on the stove and the bed, someone had lived in the house in the last 3 days. She didn't know if the owner of the house had gone out or been captured by the Chun army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Gu Jiao said to Gu Qingfeng, "Let's stay here for a night." Gu Qingfeng looked around and sighed. That's the only way. The frontier fortress was too cold. The three of them would definitely freeze to death outside. The two beds were placed at right angles, one against the inner wall, and the other against the side wall. Gu Jiao placed the old marquee on the bed against the inner wall. Then she pointed to the other bed and said to Gu Qingfeng, "Lie down." "What for?" Gu Qingfeng asked. Gu Jiao took the small basket from his back and said, "Injury." "Oh." Gu Qingfeng made an "oh" sound and obediently lay down on the other bed. It wasn't that he didn't want to squeeze in with his grandfather, but the beds here were all made of bamboo. It was difficult for one person to even turn over. It was too cold in the house. Gu Jiao first went to get a bundle of firewood and a charcoal brazier. After the fire was lit, the two of them felt much warmer. Gu Jiao began to examine Gu Qingfeng's injury. To be honest, Gu Qingfeng's injury was quite serious. If it were someone else, they would have been dead long ago, but he could still jump around. He was worthy of being called an expert at taking beatings. Gu Jiao took out iodophor and cleaned the wound on Gu Qingfeng's shoulder. Gu Qingfeng suddenly said, "Hey, what happened to you just now?" "What do you mean what happened?" Gu Jiao asked. "It's you." Gu Qingfeng thought for a bit and didn't know where to start asking. Should he ask her where she got her killer moves, or where she got her ability to treat illnesses? She was like a demon when she killed people, but when she healed the injured and dying, she was like a Buddha. It was really contradictory and strange. Gu Qingfeng's gaze fell on her serious little face. He opened his mouth and asked, "What did you do before? I mean before you came here to pretend to be Gu Jiao's mother?" She did a lot of work." "Was you an assassin?" Gu Qingfeng asked. "Or maybe a doctor?" Gu Qingfeng said in his heart. "Something like that." Gu Jiao said carelessly. "What do you mean something like that?" "Yes means yes, no means no." Gu Qingfeng muttered and suddenly thought of something. He was silent for a moment. "When we were in the governor's mansion, I thought you lost control." The moment Gu Jiao came out of the wine cellar, her killing intent was too strong. Even now, when he recalled it, he still felt frightened. "I didn't lose control," Gu Jiao said. "She didn't lose control every time. Otherwise she wouldn't have lived until now. She actually didn't know what she was like when she lost control. But Princess Xinyang said her killing intent was heavier than death soldiers. Then when she lost control, she should kill people. After killing everyone, if she still didn't stop losing control, she might kill herself. In her previous life, only her godfather knew how to calm her down. It was her godfather who personally handed her a scalpel, letting her learn how to resist the temptation of blood. She had already improved a lot. After coming to this different world, she lost control twice. The first time was when her great-aunt was injured. She was promptly comforted by her, so she didn't completely lose control. The second time was when Lu Yixing cut off his finger. She didn't remember the details of that time, but she guessed that Long Yi had restrained her. Now that her great-aunt and Long Yi weren't here, she wouldn't easily lose control. "Why are you suddenly looking at me like that?" Gu Jiao's small gaze made Gu Qingfeng's eyebrows jump. Gu Jiao continued in her heart, "Otherwise you'll lose your little life." Gu Qingfeng's right arm had 5 stitches, and his forehead had 3 stitches. "It won't leave a scar, right?" Gu Qingfeng touched the gauze on his forehead and bitterly asked. Gu Jiao strangely asked, "You're worried about leaving a scar?" Gu Qingfeng bitterly said, "After all, I'm so handsome, leaving a scar would be a pity." Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao opened the small medicine box and began to carefully search inside. Gu Qingfeng didn't understand and asked, "What are you looking for?" "Eye drops," Gu Jiao said. "I suspect that your eyes are lame." Gu Qingfeng, who was obviously a handsome man. Gu Jiao finished treating all of Gu Qingfeng's injuries. Gu Qingfeng was tied up with gauze like half a mummy, especially his face, which was covered to the point that only a pair of eyes could be seen. His eyeballs turned, and his expression was somewhat indescribable. "Was my injury that serious? I seriously suspect that you're deliberately covering up my beauty." The bonfire was about to burn out. So Gu Jiao went to the central room and brought back a bundle of firewood. Gu Qingfeng looked at her busy little figure and said, "You rest for a while, I'll keep watch tonight. We'll take turns keeping watch. You sleep for the first half of the night, and I just happen to need to change some medicine." Gu Jiao said and turned to check the splints on the old marquis's limbs. Her time and conditions in the governor's residence were limited, so she only did a simple breaking, and now she had to do it again. Also, his wounds had to be carefully examined. "Is my grandfather okay?" Gu Chengfeng looked at the old marquis and asked. Gu Jiao used shock absorption and fixation on the old marquis's waist and abdomen. The condition of the wound was good, and his blood pressure was gradually returning to normal. It was just that he had a slight fever, and they had to be careful of post-operative infection. "He's fine for now," Gu Jiao said. "You sleep, I'll wake you up later." Gu Qingfeng thought for a while but still agreed. He reminded her, "Remember to wake me up." "Okay." Gu Jiao nodded. Gu Qingfeng pulled the quilt over himself, but he did not fall asleep. In the flickering firelight, he opened his eyes and stared at Gu Jiao without blinking. Gu Jiao had just finished fixing the old marquis's left arm. She turned to look at him and said, "Is there anything else?" He lay on the bed and looked at her from this angle. She was still petite, but her shadow on the wall was illuminated by the firelight. Gu Qingfeng opened his mouth and asked, "Do you have any family? At your house?" Gu Jiao was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't know." In terms of blood, she had them, but in terms of emotions she did not. They did not want her. They did not want her as a daughter, nor did they want her as a sister. She did not want them either. How could a person not even know if she had a family? Was she an orphan? Gu Qingfeng felt that this was very likely, so he did not ask further. He cleared his throat and said, "Then don't go back. It's quite good here." Gu Jiao thought, "I don't want to go back, and I can't go back either." "Well, it's also quite good," Gu Qingfeng said vaguely. "What did you say?" Gu Jiao did not hear the words in the middle. "Nothing." Gu Qingfeng pulled the quilt over his head. "Stupid sister." Gu Qingfeng fell asleep not long after covering himself with the quilt. Gu Jiao gave Gu Qingfeng an intravenous drip, and helped the old marquis take care of all the splints. Outside the house, goose feather-like snow rustled down. The howling cold wind had dissipated at some point, leaving only the dancing snow in the night. It was completely silent. In the latter half of the night, Gu Jiao did not wake Gu Qingfeng up. She hugged the red-tasseled spear and stood at the door, silently keeping watch for the entire night. The flying snow was in front of her eyes, and the person she needed to protect was behind her. At the first glimmer of dawn, Gu Qingfeng woke up. He had not slept so well in a long time, and he felt that all the vitality in his body had been restored. He opened his eyes and saw the light coming in through the window. Only then did he remember keeping watch for the latter half of the night. Did he oversleep? Or did that girl not wake him at all? He looked around. His grandfather was still lying on the other bamboo bed, but Gu Jiao was nowhere to be seen. "Where's that girl?" Gu Qingfeng lifted the quilt and sat up. He was injured after all, and there was a pulling pain coming from all parts of his body. He frowned and relaxed his movements slightly. He first looked at his grandfather. His grandfather was still unconscious, but his breathing sounded smoother than last night. Grandfather and he were both injured. Nothing must happen to that girl. Gu Jiao had gone to look for food. In this hunter's house, there was nothing to fill her stomach other than a pile of leftover food that had been left out for God knows how many days. In addition, the firewood was almost burned out, so she entered the nearby forest. She picked up some dried branches, but did not catch any prey. She planned to carry the branches back to the house first. Just as she turned around, a person slowly walked over from the other side of the forest. Looking at the direction, he was also heading towards the small wooden house. Could it be the owner of the small wooden house? That person was wearing animal skin and a felt hat. Gu Jiao could not see his face clearly, but she felt that the other person's figure was tall and sturdy. He walked in the snow up to his thighs as if he was walking on flat ground. He was an expert. Gu Jiao made a judgment in her heart. Gu Jiao walked towards the small wooden house with the branches in her arms. The two unexpectedly met on the way. It was not until they met face to face that Gu Jiao finally saw his face clearly. And he also saw Gu Jiao. Both of them were startled at the same time. Digression. Almost 5,000 votes. When I woke up, I hoped to break through 5,000 votes. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated at a faster rate. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with connotations that cannot be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_826/1096245543. HTML Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikaga mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 488. The latest chapter of the book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel is updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. There are all kinds of novels that can't be found online. Gu Jiao didn't expect to run into Tang Yueshan, who had been missing for many days here. So the owner of that house was actually Tang Yueshan? The remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chen army couldn't find him, because he was hiding in the deep forest? In just a moment, Gu Jiao's eyes flashed with countless doubts, including whether Tang Yueshan recognized her. Gu Jiao was still wearing the night clothes from yesterday. She wore a mask on her face. Because of the rush on the horse, the peacock feathers on the mask were blown away by the cold wind, leaving only a bare silver mask. Tang Yueshan stared at the mask for more than 10 seconds. At least, that was what Gu Jiao counted in her mind. Gu Jiao's first reaction was that he recognized her. Then she thought of something else. Her second reaction was that he might as well have recognized her. Yes, Tang Yueshan didn't recognize Gu Jiao as the daughter of Marquis Manor, the beloved daughter of Empress Dowager Zhuang. Instead, he thought of the little assassin who had broken into the marshal's mansion and disabled Tang Ming. Tang Yueshan hadn't officially fought with the little assassin, but when Gu Jiao appeared in front of him like this, his first instinct was to think of the night when Tang Ming was abused. This was a father's intuition when he met the murderer. Gu Jiao asked herself if she had seen Tang Yueshan so closely after taking revenge on Tang Ming at the marshal's mansion. They might have seen each other from afar. However, she was wearing women's clothes and showed the left side of her face with the birthmark. It was hard to associate her with the assassin that night. Not to mention that both the assassin and Gu Chengfeng, the accomplice who came to the marshal's mansion to pick her up, died at the hands of Empress Dowager Zhuang. Tang Yueshan had no more reason to suspect her. But a lie was a lie. It couldn't overcome a father's instinct. Gu Jiao could tell from the look in Tang Yueshan's eyes that he had recognized her as the assassin from that night. That was why Gu Jiao had said that he might as well have recognized her. If he had recognized her as the Marquis's daughter, it would mean that he didn't have the intuition to find the culprit. The atmosphere between the two of them suddenly became stiff. Countless thoughts flashed through Gu Jiao's mind at that moment, as did Tang Yueshan. He had personally seen Empress Dowager Zhuang's trusted eunuch Qin, bring the two assassins into the forest to execute them. Afterwards, eunuch Qin came to report that the assassins had been executed. He didn't check the bodies because he believed in Empress Dowager Zhuang. He didn't think that she would protect two assassins who made trouble in the marshal's mansion. After all, he was Empress Dowager Zhuang's trusted minister. If he wanted to kill two mere assassins, why would Empress Dowager Zhuang do this? But now, this little assassin had appeared right in front of him. Other than the mask, everything else was the same. Figure, temperament, eyes closed. Gu Jiao thought. What the F***ck? She's wearing night clothes. Tang Yueshan understood everything. That night, Empress Dowager Zhuang didn't kill the two assassins at all. She had deliberately let eunuch Qin bring them into the small forest to execute them. Her goal was to put on a show for him to see. In any case, he didn't know what they looked like. In the future, they would still be able to live openly in this world. It was a pity that his Ming, had been harmed like that, but the murderer was still free in this world. Why? Why did the Empress Dowager lie to him? If this matter was a lie, then what the Empress Dowager said to him wasn't a lie. The Empress Dowager said that someone wanted to sow discord between the Marshal's mansion and Marquis Ding An's mansion, so they had drugged Gu Chongqing and Tang Ming, causing Tang Ming to humiliate Gu Yan, and causing Gu Chongqing to seriously injure Tang Ming. The Empress Dowager also said that the person behind the scenes was Imperial Concubine Jing, and Imperial Concubine Jing was a remnant of the previous dynasty. In order to not make his enemy happy, he had let Gu Chongqing go. He and Gu Chao had buried the hatchet. He had brought 10,000 soldiers and 1,000 archers to avenge Tang Ming, but what had happened? The person who had lied was the Empress Dowager. The murderer who had already been executed by the Empress Dowager was standing in front of him. Empress Dowager Zhuang had indeed lied to Tang Yueshan, but only a part of it. For example, Tang Ming and Gu Chongqing hadn't been drugged. Tang Ming had really wanted to humiliate Gu Yan, and Gu Chongqing had really wanted to cripple Tang Ming in the arena. But regarding Imperial Concubine Jing being a remnant of the previous dynasty, and her wanting to sow discord between Tang Yueshan and Marquis Ding An's mansion, Empress Dowager Zhuang had spoken from the bottom of her heart. But as long as a person told a lie, all of her words would become untrustworthy. Countless doubts and anger flashed through Tang Yueshan's mind. He hadn't seen Tang Ming humiliate Gu Yan with his own eyes. Although Tang Ming's servant had admitted it. What if the servant had been bribed by the Empress Dowager? On the contrary, Gu Chongqing had injured Tang Ming in the arena in the barracks, and this little assassin had tortured Tang Ming until he was crippled. These were facts that he had seen with his own eyes. And Empress Dowager Zhuang had protected them. Empress Dowager Zhuang. Empress Dowager Zhuang was jackals of the same tribe as them. They were all murderers who had harmed Ming. Who exactly are you? Tang Yueshan's eyes suddenly emitted a murderous aura that could destroy heaven and earth. He had been holding a prey in his hand, but now he didn't want it anymore. After coldly throwing it away, he reached out his hand to grab Gu Jiao's throat. Gu Jiao wouldn't give up without a fight. She blocked his hand with a withered branch. Unexpectedly, this guy had a pair of iron hands that went through the branch. Tang Yueshan was able to become the Grand Marshal of all the armed forces in the world, not only because of Empress Dowager Zhuang's favor, but also because of his own strength. His internal strength was very strong, and it wasn't any weaker than His Majesty's Dragon Shadow Guards. Gu Jiao had been busy for a day and a night. Her physical strength was already exhausted, and there was no way she could withstand his attack. However, at this critical moment, the sound of soldiers talking suddenly came from the forest. "Boss, there's a small wooden house over there. Let's go. Let's go and see." It was the army of the remnants of the previous dynasty. Tang Yueshan was also wanted by the remnants of the previous dynasty. His expression changed immediately. "You're a remnant of the previous dynasty." "I'm not," Gu Jiao said. When Tang Yueshan heard Gu Jiao's female voice, he was even more surprised than when he saw the remnants of the previous dynasty's army. "You're a girl." It wasn't his fault that he hadn't seen the world. It was just that. How could the methods she used to torture Tang Ming be the work of a girl? Was she that shameless? Gu Jiao originally thought that she was unlucky enough to run into Tang Yueshan while picking up firewood. However, now that she saw the remnants of the previous dynasty's army, she felt that Tang Yueshan was the one who was really unlucky. He was hiding in the deep mountains and forests, and if nothing unexpected happened, he could hide for a year and a half. But now she was exposed. Tang Yueshan also figured out the crux of the matter. He gritted his teeth and looked at Gu Jiao. "You're the one who attracted the remnants of the previous dynasty's army." Gu Jiao shook her head like a rattledrum. "Be careful with your words." Tang Yueshan was furious. Where did this girl come from? First she hurt Tang Ming, and now she wanted to hurt him. "Don't kill me. I'll help you deal with them." Tang Yueshan's mouth twitched. Help? Did she have a choice? She made it sound like they would let her go if she didn't do anything. Didn't she know who attracted the enemy's army? Could she be any more shameless? Gu Jiao waved at the remnants of the previous dynasty's army, who were still looking for a path. "We're here." Tang Yueshan's body trembled. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Dozens of arrows flew toward them with murderous intent. Gu Jiao flashed behind Tang Yueshan in a second. Tang Yueshan was speechless. The enemy had sent 2 small teams, totaling more than 50 soldiers. These soldiers were more skilled in martial arts than the patrolling soldiers. After all, the commander had ordered them to capture Tang Yueshan alive. Naturally, these soldiers were the best. The group didn't recognize Tang Yueshan at first. Gu Jiao pointed at Tang Yueshan and said, "He's the Marshal Tang you're looking for." Tang Yueshan was betrayed just like that. The group of soldiers slashed at Tang Yueshan. After all, their superiors had only ordered them to capture the young assassin alive. They didn't say anything about keeping Tang Yueshan alive. Tang Yueshan was the marshal of the Zhao kingdom. His head was worth a lot of money. Their king would reward whoever beheaded him handsomely. Then, Tang Yueshan saw something very strange. The group of soldiers slashed Gu Jiao with only half of their strength, and they used the back of their swords. When it was Tang Yueshan's turn, they slashed with all their might. Tang Yueshan was so angry that he twitched. In this small battle, Tang Yueshan was the main force on the enemy's side. He almost single-handedly killed 40 soldiers of the previous dynasty. Gu Jiao was so lazy that she didn't make a move until Tang Yueshan was almost exhausted. When Gu Jiao finished off the rest of the soldiers, Tang Yueshan sat in the snow, holding his chest and gasping for breath. He watched Gu Jiao's skills. The more he watched, the more serious he became. That night when Gu Jiao sneaked into the marshal's mansion, even if he didn't fight with her, he could still see her being hunted by the Tang family's archers. It was obvious that this girl's skills had improved a lot in just a few months' time. If he didn't get rid of her now, she would be a big problem for him in the future. Gu Jiao was killing the last 3 soldiers. Her back was exposed to Tang Yueshan. Just as Gu Jiao was about to stop her last attack, Tang Yueshan quietly gathered his internal force and palm and slapped toward Gu Jiao's back. But as soon as he raised his hand, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Then he fell in the snow. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel is more complete and updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. You can find all the novels that you can't find on the internet. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964226/1096027993. HTML Genius memorized this site's address. www.zhbqg.com Bikuj mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 489. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more fully. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. Gu Qingfeng looked around the small wooden house and confirmed that Gu Jiao really wasn't there. His heart tightened. Of course, he didn't think that Gu Jiao had left them behind. If she wanted to leave them behind, she didn't have to follow them in the first place. The firewood was almost used up, and there was a shortage of food. Gu Qingfeng guessed that Gu Jiao either went to look for food or firewood. He couldn't let her take the risk alone in the snow-covered forest, so he planned to go out and look for her. Who would have thought that as soon as he opened the door, he would see someone carrying a bundle of firewood on their back and using some unknown animal skin as a tool. They were silently dragging a person, walking through the snow with great difficulty. The reason why it was strenuous was because she hadn't slept for a long time. Secondly, she was physically exhausted. Thirdly, the snow in the forest was too heavy. It made it difficult to walk, not to mention that she was carrying a bundle of firewood and dragging a person. Gu Qingfeng was a little dumbfounded. He guessed that she was going to chop firewood, but he didn't expect that she would chop a person back. Gu Qingfeng walked through the thick snow towards her. When he got closer, he heard weak breathing and confirmed that it wasn't a corpse. Gu Qingfeng's expression was a little complicated. What's going on? Don't tell me you picked up another person. Why did he use another? Wasn't it because of the old madam and Xiaoliulong's deeds? Without waiting for Gu Jiao's reply, Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched. He said with a look of disdain, "Do you have a hobby of picking up people in the house? Or is it because you can't find food so?" Gu Jiao gave him a look of concern for an idiot. "Are you very free?" "I'm not," Gu Qingfeng denied flatly. He pointed at the man whose face was covered by messy hair and snow. "Who is it?" Gu Jiao said. "See for yourself." Gu Qingfeng squatted down and brushed away the messy hair and snow on the man's face. A familiar and dignified face greeted Gu Qingfeng's eyes. Shocked, Gu Qingfeng jumped to his feet and took a big step back. "Tang Yueshan." He looked at Gu Jiao in disbelief. Why did you bring him back?" "No, I should be asking you. Why is he here? And dressed like this?" Needless to say, the animal skin under Tang Yueshan's body was taken from him. His legs were also wrapped with animal skin to keep warm, and he wore an animal skin cap on his head. He was dressed like a hunter. Wait, the owner of this cabin. Could it be Tang Yueshan? Gu Qingfeng's jaw dropped. Gu Jiao said, "I don't know who the previous owner is, but the current owner should be Tang Yueshan." So, the reason why the remnants of the previous dynasty and the Chen army couldn't find Tang Yueshan was because he was hiding here? But why is he injured? There were bloodstains on his clothes, so Gu Qingfeng naturally thought that he was injured. Gu Jiao followed Gu Qingfeng's gaze and explained, "You mean his blood? He vomited it. He was poisoned." Poisoned? Gu Qingfeng was even more confused. Wasn't Tang Yueshan very powerful? How could he be poisoned? Gu Qingfeng thought of 100 ways Tang Yueshan fell, but none of them had anything to do with poisoning. For a warrior like him, even if he died, he should have died of injuries. Gu Qingfeng didn't expect Gu Jiao to answer this question. After all, she only met Tang Yueshan by chance. Tang Yueshan himself might not even know that he was poisoned, and even if he knew, he wouldn't tell Gu Jiao anything. "Give him to me." Gu Qingfeng reached out to Gu Jiao. He didn't want to save Tang Yueshan, but Tang Yueshan was too greedy. He didn't listen to his grandfather's advice, which led to the defeat of the army. He also refused to lend his grandfather his men, which made his grandfather a hostage. Even if Tang Yueshan died in front of him, he wouldn't bat an eyelid. But Tang Yueshan was brought back by Gu Jiao. Gu Qingfeng thought about it, and decided that he didn't have the right to interfere with what Gu Jiao did to Tang Yueshan. But he still had to remind her of her position with Tang Yueshan. "Don't blame me for not reminding you. You disabled Tang Ming, so Tang Yueshan is your sworn enemy. If he finds out that you're the one who hurt Tang Ming, he won't let you go." "Okay." Gu Jiao answered, indicating that she knew. "Then why did you save him?" Gu Qingfeng didn't understand. Gu Jiao looked at Gu Qingfeng and said, "Among you guys, he's the best fighter." Gu Qingfeng looked at himself, wrapped in bandages, and thought of his unconscious grandfather. For a moment he couldn't refute. If the Chen Kingdom's army and the remnants of the previous dynasty came after them, it seemed that Tang Yueshan was the only one left who could hold his own. However, Gu Qingfeng thought of something and grabbed Gu Jiao's wrist. He pointed at Tang Yueshan, who was lying in the snow, and said, "Wait, didn't you say that he was poisoned? Then he can't fight, right?" Gu Jiao's words shattered his hope. "He can detoxify the poison. He'll recover faster than you guys." Gu Qingfeng was speechless. Gu Jiao dragged Tang Yueshan into the small wooden hut. She also dragged Tang Yueshan's game into the house. Tang Yueshan threw it away, but Gu Jiao picked it up again. There were 3 plump rabbits and 2 plump pheasants. There were suddenly 3 patients in the small wooden hut. The 2 small bamboo beds were not enough for them to sleep in. Gu Jiao moved 2 benches from the central room and set them up, one in front of the other. Then she removed the door panel of the bedroom and set it up on the 2 benches. Gu Qingfeng was speechless. How could this work? Gu Jiao put Tang Yueshan on the temporary bed. Then she began to check Tang Yueshan's condition. The black marks on Tang Yueshan's forehead and fingernails were not obvious, but his gums were swollen. A blue-black line could be seen under the mucous membrane of his gums. It was mercury poisoning. Gu Jiao found a porcelain bottle on Tang Yueshan's body and poured out a few dark red pills. Gu Jiao carefully analyzed the ingredients in the pills and found a small amount of mercury. Mercury was extracted from cinnabar. In ancient times, it was mainly used to make pills and preserve corpses. Only the rich and powerful could afford to use cinnabar and mercury. However, whether it was pure cinnabar or mercury, they could not be used to make pills. Long-term consumption would lead to poisoning. Therefore, the kings who begged for immortality did not live long. Gu Jiao did not know why Tang Yueshan had such a thing on him. Fortunately, the poison was mild and did not hurt his internal organs. Fortunately, there was a special antidote for this kind of poison. Gu Jiao took out the medicine from the medicine box and gave Tang Yueshan an intravenous drip. Tang Yueshan vomited blood and fainted not only because he was poisoned, but also because he suffered some internal injuries. However, it was not as serious as the old dukes and Gu Qingfeng's. 2 hours later, Tang Yueshan woke up on the wooden door. His treatment was over. He was covered with his own animal skin, and there was a burning brazier not far from him, so he did not feel cold. Gu Qingfeng went to the stove in the central room to watch the fire. There was a pot of pheasant soup simmering on the stove. The strong aroma of the chicken soup drifted into the room. Tang Yueshan had not eaten for a few days. He suddenly felt hungry and his stomach growled. Gu Jiao was changing the old duke's dressing. Hearing the sound, she said flatly, "The chicken soup is not ready yet." The room was not big. Tang Yueshan's wooden bed was in front of the old duke's bamboo bed. Tang Yueshan turned his head and saw the old duke and Gu Jiao on the bamboo bed. A trace of seriousness and surprise flashed across his eyes. He looked away from the old duke and fixed his eyes on Gu Jiao, who was changing the old duke's dressing. He asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" Gu Jiao changed the last of the dressing and covered the old duke with a quilt. She turned around and took off the mask on her face. Tang Yueshan frowned when he saw Gu Jiao's fairy-like face with a red birthmark. He had never met Gu Jiao, but he had heard of Gu Jiao. She had a red birthmark on the left side of her face. She was only 15 years old. She grew up in the countryside but was doted on by the Empress Dowager. "I should have guessed it was you. Gu Yan's elder sister and the Empress Dowager's sweetheart. That would explain why she took revenge on Tang Ming, and why the Empress Dowager lied and acted for her." Tang Yueshan exuded a murderous aura once again. "Don't think that I'll let bygones be bygones just because you saved me. You've harmed Ming, and I want you to pay with your life." Gu Jiao heard his voice and knew that he was recovering well. In fact, Gu Jiao did not give him much medicine. He took the internal injury himself and healed the external injury himself. The only thing Gu Jiao did was to give him some medicine to detoxify him. Well, it was really convenient. Tang Yueshan wanted to kill Gu Jiao again. Gu Jiao suddenly raised her hand and stopped him. "Before you do it, you might as well check your condition first." "What do you mean?" Tang Yueshan asked. Gu Jiao asked enigmatically, "Do you think I will bring you back for no reason?" Tang Yueshan's face darkened. Gu Jiao said, "Lift up your sleeve and look at your left hand. Is there a red line starting from your palm? Look at your dantian again. Is there an additional green imprint? Let me touch your hair one last time. Are you going bald soon?" Tang Yueshan checked his body one by one. When he touched his bald head, his expression changed. "What did you do to me?" Gu Jiao put her hands behind her back and looked at him condescendingly. She raised her eyebrows and said, "Nothing. I just poisoned you. You'd better listen to me. Otherwise, you will die a horrible death." Digression: guess, did Jiaojia really poison Tang Yueshan? The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. You can find all the novels that you can't find on the internet here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_8964226/1096013880. HTML Genius memorized the website address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuj mobile reading website. zhhbqg. Com. Chapter 490. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. The novel will be updated more quickly. Millions of novels will be read for free. There are all kinds of novels that you can't find online. After saying that, Gu Jiao walked out of the room and ignored Tang Yueshan. Tang Yueshan was smart enough to be fooled. It wasn't that Tang Yueshan was stupid. Well, he was a little stupid. Could such a stupid person lead an army to war? The answer was yes. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. A person's talent was reflected in different fields. Some were good at literature, some were good at fighting, and some were good at scheming. Tang Yueshan was invincible on the battlefield because he was familiar with the art of war. He was brave and good at fighting, and the archers of the Tang family helped him a lot. Tang Yueshan mainly relied on bravery to fight, but the art of war and strategy were secondary. Gu Jiao went to the central room to see how the chicken soup was simmering. Gu Qingfeng sat on a small stool in front of the stove, warming himself while looking at Gu Jiao. Just now, the two of them were talking loudly in the room, so Gu Qingfeng heard it too. He asked Gu Jiao in a low voice, "Did you really poison that guy?" Gu Jiao lifted the lid of the pot and shook her head. No. How could she bear to spend such an expensive poison? She drew the red line. She pinched the mark. She pulled the hair. Gu Qingfeng was speechless. After Gu Jiao went out, Tang Yueshan was lost in thought. Of course, he suspected that Gu Jiao was scaring him, but Gu Jiao acted so naturally that he didn't feel guilty at all. Ordinary people wouldn't carry poison with them, but Gu Jiao was a doctor. Tang Yueshan had heard about this when he was in the capital, not to mention that he saw Gu Jiao change the medicine for the old duke with his own eyes. He was afraid that Gu Jiao had cured his injuries. Medicine and poison went hand in hand, so it was not surprising that a doctor had poison. Thinking of this, Tang Yueshan suddenly didn't dare to act rashly. The food was placed in the central room. During dinner, Tang Yueshan met Gu Qingfeng. Gu Qingfeng did not wear a mask either. It was not that he did not want to, but there was no need to. His head and face were covered in gauze, only revealing his eyes and mouth. Tang Yueshan could tell from Gu Qingfeng's figure that he was the other assassin from that night. Strictly speaking, Gu Qingfeng was not an assassin. He was there to look for Gu Jiao. When he arrived at the marshal's residence, Gu Jiao had already started fighting with the marshal's residence. He had only escaped from the marshal's residence with Gu Jiao, but his figure and silhouette were deeply imprinted in Tang Yueshan's mind, even though they had only met face to face. Tang Yueshan looked at Gu Jiao, who was munching on a chicken drumstick, and then looked at Gu Qingfeng, who could only drink soup. His face darkened. She's the daughter of the Gu family. Who are you to the Gu family? First, the two of them had participated in the revenge against Tang Ming. Then, the two of them had saved the old duke. Tang Yueshan did not believe that there was nothing going on between them. Gu Qingfeng said angrily, "Who I am has nothing to do with you." Tang Yueshan looked at Gu Qingfeng deeply. Gu Chao has 4 grandsons. You're not Gu Changqing, so there are 3 more. You're not the youngest, so there are only 2 left. Wait, does your stupidity even discriminate between people? You're so easily fooled when you're with that girl. How come you're so smart when you're with me? Tang Yueshan continued. I heard that Gu Chao's 3rd grandson shaved his head and became a monk. Looks like you're the 2nd. Gu Qingfeng's mouth twitched again. What shaved his head and became a monk? His younger brother just could not grow hair. Gu Qingfeng gritted his teeth and muttered. Who spread that rumor? I'll kill him when I get back. Tang Yueshan said sarcastically. I only knew that Gu Chao's eldest grandsons were promising. I didn't expect them to be so skillful. Skillful was a compliment, but when it came from his mouth, there was an inexplicable sense of mockery. Tang Yueshan continued. Your grandfather lived an honest and upright life, but each of his grandsons is more devious than the last. I really don't know if his sanctimonious appearance in the past was all an act, or if you've all gone astray. Gu Qingfeng's expression turned cold. However, his handsome face was covered, so only a pair of cold eyes could be seen. Don't make slanderous accusations here. Our affairs have nothing to do with my grandfather. Speaking of sanctimonious appearances, I'd like to ask Grand Marshal Tang, where did you get the audacity to accuse others when you took your younger brother's wife and gave birth to Tang Ming? Tang Yueshan said, You. Also you said we've gone astray? Tang Ming is a pile of mud that can't be helped up to a wall. As his biological father, where did you get the confidence to say that other people's children have gone astray? No matter how astray we are, we've never harmed a good girl or taken someone else's younger brother. The Empress Dowager gave you a way out by saying that Tang Ming was drugged, and you believed it. How innocent do you think your son is? You think no one knows about your scandals. You think your son is the best in the world. He's nothing. You. Tang Yueshan had never been pointed at and scolded like this before. He was so angry that his face turned red. Moreover, generals were rarely eloquent. They were used to fighting, so you didn't have the upper hand in a war of words. Gu Qingfeng's words hit the nail on the head. He didn't give Tang Yueshan any face at all. Tang Yueshan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He stood up abruptly and was about to slap Gu Qingfeng. Gu Qingfeng slammed his chopsticks on the table and quickly stood up as well. He puffed out his chest and shouted at him. You want to kill me? Fine. Come on. If you're not afraid of dying from the poison, then bring it on. If I die, you'll never get the antidote. Gu Qingfeng got into character in a second. His ability to improvise on the spot was perfect. Tang Yueshan's anger was instantly choked by an invisible hand. He clenched his fists in anger and finally sat down in humiliation. There were several heavy snowfalls in the next few days. They couldn't leave this place at all. Correspondingly, it would be difficult for the second wave of remnants of the previous dynasty to find them. For the time being, they stayed in the cabin. On the third day, the old duke developed a slight postoperative infection. His wound was red and swollen, accompanied by a high fever. Gu Jiao cleaned his wound and gave him an anti-inflammatory injection. He woke up several times in the middle of the treatment, but in a daze he saw Tang Yueshan, Gu Qingfeng, and even his little brother. Wasn't this the frontier fortress? Why were his little brother and Gu Qingfeng here? And why were they together with Tang Yueshan? The old marquis felt that he was most likely dreaming, so he fell asleep again. On the fifth day, the sky finally cleared up. Tang Yueshan's injury had basically recovered, but there was still some residual mercury in his body. Gu Qingfeng was also recovering well. He had finally removed the bandages on his body and head. We can't stay here for long. We'd better leave as soon as possible, Tang Yueshan said to Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng during dinner. Tang Yueshan had led soldiers before, so he knew that every troop had its own route before departure. The remnants of the previous dynasty must have been suspicious since the two troops had not returned for a long time. They just couldn't come in because of the heavy snow. Now that the snow had stopped, they would soon find them. Gu Jiao nodded. Okay, let's go. Gu Jiao took out the temporary stretcher she had made a few days ago and put the injured old duke on it. Tang Yueshan and Gu Qingfeng carried the stretcher while Gu Jiao led the horse. Gu Jiao's red tasseled spear and small basket were carried on her back. The red tasseled spear was so ugly that Gu Qingfeng couldn't stand it and wrapped it with a cloth. Tang Yueshan did not recognize that it was the divine weapon of the Yin Kingdom that Marquis Xianping had brought back as a trophy. But he could tell that it was a long spear, a few inches longer and heavier than an ordinary spear. How could a girl use such a powerful weapon? Could it be Gu Qiao's? Or Gu Jiao's? Tang Yueshan didn't believe that it was Gu Jiao's. Tang Yueshan was more familiar with the forest and knew how to get out. The four of them walked on the thick snow. In order to confuse the enemy, Gu Qingfeng and Tang Yueshan would deliberately leave footprints in different directions, and then use their lightness skills to return. When it was dark, they came to a river. After crossing this river, we'll be out of Lingguan City. Tang Yueshan looked at the other side of the river and said. Gu Qingfeng's eyes fell on the frozen river. How do we cross? Walk. Tang Yueshan said. There are no boats here. We can only walk. Gu Jiao found a stone nearby with the help of the reflection of the snow. She threw the stone on the ice and a series of dull sounds rang out. We can walk, Gu Jiao said. Tang Yueshan walked in front with the stretcher. He stepped on the ice first and then turned to Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng. The ice is very slippery. Be careful. Okay. Gu Jiao nodded. Give me the stretcher. The 3 people and 2 horses carefully stepped onto the ice. The horses had horseshoes on their feet. Although they weren't of the best quality, they could still prevent them from slipping. Tang Yueshan and Gu Qingfeng fell several times. Fortunately, the old marquis was firmly fixed on the stretcher. Otherwise, they would have thrown him out. Gu Jiao, on the other hand, had excellent balance. It was as if she was walking on flat ground. After countless falls, the 3 of them finally reached the other side of the river. Panting, Gu Qingfeng asked, "Where are we going later?" Tang Yueshan said, "East is Yueqing City. West is Yi City." Gu Qingfeng said without hesitation, "East. Back to Yueqing City. Yi City has been occupied by the Chen army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Let's not go there to die." Gu Jiao glanced at Tang Yueshan. Tang Yueshan didn't say anything. The 4 of them continued forward. But just as they were about to reach the shore, an arrow pierced through the air behind them. With a whoosh, it shot towards Gu Jiao's back. Digression. I'm stuck. I'll write it tomorrow morning. Everyone come back later. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster. Millions of novels are free to read. Novels with content that can't be found online are all available here. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896426/1095797773. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 491. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. There are all kinds of novels that can't be found on the internet. The arrow was shot with great force and the sound it made was also very loud. The murderous aura immediately filled the ice. Gu Qingfeng and Tang Yueshan also sensed the movement, but they were carrying the stretcher and couldn't free their hands immediately. Watch out! Gu Qingfeng shouted and moved towards Gu Jiao, trying to take the arrow for her with his back. Gu Jiao pulled him behind her and grabbed the cold arrow with her left hand. Then she turned around and shot the arrow towards the other side of the river. A soldier screamed in the night. Gu Qingfeng secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Just now he had broken out in cold sweat. Tang Yueshan looked at Gu Jiao with a complicated expression. As a general who had been on the battlefield, he could naturally tell that Gu Jiao did not know Qinggong, and her martial arts were not top-notch. However, her reaction, her temperament, and even the decisiveness with which she attacked surpassed countless men in the world. Did the Gu family really mistake her for someone else? Didn't they secretly train her to be their trump card? The thought only flashed in his mind for a moment before he rejected it. If the Gu family wanted to train someone secretly, it would be Gu Qingfeng. After all, Gu Qingfeng was also a good seedling. How could they train a girl? He knew Gu Chao's character too well. He would never value a girl. On the other side of the river stood the remnants of the previous dynasty, who were chasing after them. The leader was a man riding a white horse. He was wearing a silver fox cloak and silver fox gloves. In the darkness, his appearance was not very clear, but he sat upright, and his whole body exuded a noble and elegant aura. Who is that? Gu Qingfeng asked. Tang Yueshan's face darkened. Prince Consort. Realization dawned on Gu Qingfeng's face. So it's that imperial family from the previous dynasty. No wonder he looks so pretentious. They looked at the other side of the river, and the person on the other side of the river was also looking at them. The man was like a god of the night, looking at them as if he was looking at a few rabbits fleeing from a hunting ground. Gu Jiao grabbed the red tasseled spear and coldly pulled off the cloth on the spear. She stood in front of the three of them and looked towards the opposite shore with a murderous aura. "You guys go first." "Let's go." Tang Yueshan made a prompt decision. Gu Qingfeng also understood that it was inappropriate for either him or Tang Yueshan to stay. He didn't trust Tang Yueshan in the first place. He didn't know what would happen if he left Tang Yueshan here. As for letting Tang Yueshan go with Gu Jiao, he was even more worried. Tang Yueshan's kung fu was very good. If he found out that he wasn't poisoned and was just fooled by Gu Jiao, then Gu Jiao would be in danger. Gu Qingfeng gritted his teeth. He and Tang Yueshan carried the stretcher and quickly went ashore, disappearing into the endless darkness. The man with the silver fox on the other side of the river stared at Gu Jiao. His eyes lingered on her red-tasseled spear for a moment. He seemed to have recognized something. He hesitated for a moment, but it didn't take long. He raised his hand and pressed the tip of his finger down. Gu Jiao seemed to hear him say, "Attack." Hundreds of soldiers stepped on the ice and rushed towards Gu Jiao with long swords. Gu Jiao didn't rush to attack. Instead, she took out a pair of ice skates from her small basket and tied them to her feet. No one understood what she was doing, and no one cared. There were hundreds of them. It was more than enough to kill one person, wasn't it? Moreover, they were soldiers from the frontier fortress. The soles of their shoes were anti-slip, so they could walk freely on the ice. No one expected that once Gu Jiao made her move, they would be dumbfounded. They could at most walk steadily on the ice, but this masked kid was actually running on the ice. No, he was flying on the ice. Gu Jiao was too fast. With the ice skates on, she was like a nighthawk that spread its wings. No one could catch her figure. She waved her spear, and every time she attacked, it was a killing move. The soldiers in front of her fell one by one. In just a moment, almost half of them were killed. "Sir," one of his trusted subordinates looked at the man with the silver fox in shock and worry. The man with the silver fox didn't say anything. He just stared at Gu Jiao, who was bathed in blood. Her red-tasseled spear was stained with blood. Her body was also covered in blood, but none of it was hers. The man with the silver fox slowly took off his gloves and passed his fair and slender hand to his subordinate. His subordinate understood and presented a big bow with both hands. The man with the silver fox held the bow with his right hand and took out 3 arrows from the quiver hanging on the saddle with his left hand. He shot the 3 arrows at Gu Jiao. His 3 arrows almost blocked all of her escape routes. No matter how she dodged, she would at least be hit by one of his arrows. If she was unlucky, all 3 arrows would hit her. The soldiers on the ice seemed to have seen through their sir's trick. They didn't hesitate to block Gu Jiao with their lives. At this moment, something unexpected happened. On the other side of the river, 3 arrows were shot at them. Each arrow hit the man with the silver fox's arrow and split it in half. The force of the arrows was still strong, and they were shot at the man with the silver fox. The man with the silver fox picked up the shield from his trusted subordinate and blocked the arrows that were shot at him. The 3 arrows looked like they were aimed at him, but when they got closer, he realized that only 1 arrow had hit his shield. The other 2 arrows had clearly hit his 2 trusted subordinates. The 2 of them fell into the snow on the spot. The man with the silver fox looked across the ice and saw Tang Yueshan, who was coming back with the bow in his hand. Tang Yueshan did not cross the river. He found a vantage point on a big tree and aimed at Gu Jiao's blind spot. If 1 came, he would shoot. If 2 came, he would shoot a pair. The best archers in the Tang family were the archers. As the head of the Tang family, Tang Yueshan's archery skills were unrivaled. Gu Jiao knew that Tang Yueshan was coming back. So when the man with the silver fox attacked her, she did not hesitate to show her back to Tang Yueshan. To be honest, Tang Yueshan was surprised by her trust in him. Was she not afraid that he would not make it in time or make a mistake? Gu Jiao fought without any scruples. Her speed on the ice was very fast. If it was an ordinary archer, they would not be able to keep up with her speed. However, Tang Yueshan kept up with her. Gu Jiao pierced a soldier with her spear, and 2 more soldiers came from behind her. She didn't even bat an eyelid and rushed forward to kill them. Tang Yueshan shot the 2 of them with an arrow. If Gu Jiao was the spear that charged forward bravely, Tang Yueshan was the shield that protected her back. The two of them cooperated seamlessly. Tang Yueshan did not have such tacit understanding with his biological son, Tang Ming. Tang Ming was an excellent soldier. However, he did not dare to entrust his back to anyone. He only trusted himself. So he had some scruples when fighting. It was said that father and son were soldiers in battle. In fact, Tang Yueshan was quite satisfied with his cooperation with Tang Ming if he did not encounter Gu Jiao. However, after this fight, Tang Yueshan finally realized what true tacit understanding was. Wherever Gu Jiao rushed, Tang Yueshan's arrow would clear a path for her. Wherever Gu Jiao retreated, Tang Yueshan's arrow would protect her. There were only two of them, but they had the momentum of a magnificent army. The Silver Fox man narrowed his eyes slightly. When Tang Yueshan drew his bow again to kill the stumbling block behind Gu Jiao, the man with the silver fox aimed at Tang Yueshan's leg and shot an arrow. If Tang Yueshan could protect himself, he would not be able to protect Gu Jiao. Between the two of them, one of them had to be injured. Tang Yueshan gritted his teeth and shot at Gu Jiao's side. Tang Yueshan let out a muffled groan as the sharp blade pierced his thigh. He fell from the tree with a sharp pain. Gu Jiao frowned. She kicked away the last soldier, grabbed the red-tasseled spear in her hand, and galloped across the ice. She was like a flash of black lightning. With a whoosh, her red-tasseled spear pierced through the Silver Fox man's cloak and slid past his strong waist. "Sir!" a soldier shouted. The Silver Fox man's belt was broken. He covered his waist and jumped from the horse's back. Gu Jiao held the red-tasseled spear and looked up at the Silver Fox man who retreated. The Silver Fox man also looked at Gu Jiao. At that moment, he saw endless coldness and bloodlust in the young man's eyes. The young man grabbed the belt that fell from his body. He was looking up at him, but the Silver Fox man felt like he was being looked down upon. The young man seemed to be saying coldly, "Next time, it won't be your belt that I want but your life." The Silver Fox man left, but his small army would stay here forever. Gu Jiao went to the other side of the river, took the ice blade and put it back in the basket. There was an arrow in Tang Yueshan's left thigh, which went through his entire leg. Gu Jiao put the red-tasseled spear and the basket on the ground. She knelt on one knee and said to Tang Yueshan, "Bear with it." Cold sweat broke out on Tang Yueshan's forehead. Gu Jiao took out her dagger, cut off the arrowhead, and pulled the arrow out from the other end. Blood splattered everywhere. She quickly covered the two bloody holes in Tang Yueshan's thigh with gauze. "It's useless." Tang Yueshan's lips were pale. "It's a rusty arrow. Girl, I regret it. If I had known, I wouldn't have saved you." Tang Yueshan was a man who had experienced countless battles. He knew that once this rusty weapon hurt someone, it could never be healed. The prince consort did it on purpose. He wanted to kill him or Gu Jiao. Gu Jiao calmly took out a syringe from the small medicine box. Tang Yueshan looked at the thick and long needle. His heart skipped a beat. "What are you doing?" Gu Jiao raised her eyebrows. "I'm giving you a tetanus injection." Tang Yueshan didn't understand what she was talking about, but Gu Jiao's action of pulling down his pants with the needle made him panic. "You brat. I saved you. You stabbed me with the needle. Are you even human? You ouch." Tang Yueshan felt a chill and pain in his buttocks. Grand Marshal Tang, who would never cry, bit his finger and cried. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. You can find all the novels that you can't find online. https://www.zhbqg.com/89642_896428226/1095742001. HTML Genius memorized this website's address in 1 second. www.zhbqg.com Bikuj mobile reading website. zhbqg.com. Chapter 492. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more frequently. Millions of novels are free to read. There are all kinds of novels that you can't find online. Oh, here comes another one who is afraid of needles. A skin test was required for a tetanus antitoxin injection. However, there was no skin test in the medicine box, which meant that Gu Jiao could only give Tang Yueshan a desensitization injection. That was, she would inject a small amount of the antitoxin into Tang Yueshan's body with normal saline. Tang Yueshan was injected 4 times. Gu Jiao looked at the medicine box. Was she bullying Tang Yueshan on purpose? A gust of cold wind blew, and the medicine box was silent. After each injection, there was a moment of observation. Gu Jiao didn't stay idle. She went to clean up the battlefield. By cleaning up, she meant to take every soldier's money pouch, empty every soldier's dry food, and take away the horse that the man with the silver fox didn't have time to take. It was a war horse that was suitable for a frontier fortress. It was fat and strong, and could withstand the cold. Gu Jiao was very satisfied. In addition to these, Gu Jiao also pulled back Tang Yueshan's arrows and the arrows of the remnants of the previous dynasty. She also picked up 2 good shields. Tang Yueshan looked at her, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Even a veteran wouldn't be so skilled. After cleaning up the battlefield, Tang Yueshan also finished the last injection. The 2 of them prepared to meet up with Gu Chengfeng and the old duke. Together with the 2 horses from before, they now had 3 horses. Gu Jiao and Tang Yueshan each rode a horse, and the 3rd horse carried their things. Gu Jiao rode the horse left by the man with the silver fox. She had to admit that the prince's horse was different from the commoners. It was not only beautiful and tall, but its saddle was also made of gold. It was very majestic. Gu Jiao sat valiantly on the horse's back and shook her head happily. Tang Yueshan was speechless. The 2 of them went west. Just now, Tang Yueshan and Gu Qingfeng found a cave. After putting the old marquis in the cave, Tang Yueshan picked up his bow and went back. Gu Qingfeng couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. Gu Qingfeng couldn't leave the heavily injured old marquis to search for someone, so he could only wait anxiously in the cave. After waiting for a long time, they heard the sound of horse hooves approaching from afar. He walked out of the cave and used the light reflected from the snow to take a closer look. When he saw the person sitting on the horse, his hanging heart finally settled back into his stomach. Gu Qingfeng came to pick up Gu Jiao and found that there was an extra horse and a lot of things. Gu Qingfeng frowned and looked at Gu Jiao suspiciously. Did you go to war or rob? Gu Jiao dismounted. Tang Yueshan dismounted as well. Gu Qingfeng saw the gauze wrapped around his thigh. Are you hurt? Tang Yueshan opened his mouth to reply, but Gu Jiao had already turned to Gu Qingfeng. Are you hurt? No, Gu Jiao said. She wouldn't get hurt easily. If she got hurt, she wouldn't be able to see anything. That's good. Give it to me. You go in and warm yourself by the fire. Gu Qingfeng took the reins from Gu Jiao. Tang Yueshan also handed the reins to Gu Qingfeng. Gu Qingfeng said grumpily, tie up your own horse. Tang Yueshan chuckled. This is your horse. Gu Qingfeng was speechless. Gu Jiao walked into the cave and found that it wasn't an ordinary cave. The entrance was narrow, but there was a huge cave inside. No wonder Gu Qingfeng dared to make a fire. The light from the fire couldn't reach the entrance. Perhaps it was because of the heavens, but it snowed again that night. Heavy snowflakes the size of goose feathers fell one after another, covering their tracks. The 3 of them sat around the fire. The old duke lay on the stretcher next to Gu Chengfeng. After a long journey, they were a little hungry. Gu Jiao took out a small pot from the basket on her back. Tang Yueshan's eyelids twitched when he saw the pot. Why did this girl bring a pot with her? Gu Jiao went outside to fill the pot with clean snow and put it over the fire to boil. Then she took out the dry food she looted from the soldiers of the former dynasty. Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng both had their own water sacks, but Tang Yueshan didn't. Here you go. Gu Jiao handed him a water sack. Tang Yueshan thought, why do you have everything? Tang Yueshan took the water sack. Seeing the emblem of the former dynasty on it, he understood that Gu Jiao looted it from the soldiers again. When they were marching and fighting, it was good enough to have water to drink. Naturally, They wouldn't be picky about whether the water sack had been used before. However, Gu Jiao gave him a new one. He didn't know if it was a coincidence or if she had chosen a new one. Tang Yueshan looked at Gu Jiao with a complicated expression. It's almost done, Gu Jiao said. Tang Yueshan lowered his gaze. He didn't say that he wasn't waiting for food. Gu Jiao distributed the baked pancakes. The few of them ate the pancakes and drank the snow water. No one said anything. Tang Yueshan was used to this kind of food. He subconsciously looked at Gu Jiao and Gu Qingfeng. He thought that Gu Jiao wouldn't be used to it. Who would have thought that Gu Jiao ate at ease while Gu Qingfeng looked disgusted? That was true. This girl grew up in the countryside and suffered hardships. She wasn't like Gu Qingfeng, who had always been a rich young master in the capital. How could he swallow this kind of food? Thinking of this, Tang Yueshan looked at Gu Jiao with a complicated expression. After the meal, Gu Qingfeng took out a map. He wanted to see where they were and which path was best to take to return to ancient Moon City. Gu Jiao suddenly asked Tang Yueshan, "Are you planning to go to Yi City?" Tang Yueshan was surprised. He didn't ask Gu Jiao how she guessed it, nor did he deny it. Gu Qingfeng looked at him in confusion. "Why are you going to Yi City? Yi City has been occupied by the Chun army and the remnants of the previous dynasty. Aren't you going to die there? If you want to go, go by yourself. We won't go with you." His grandfather was seriously injured. The bones in his limbs were broken and his spleen was sewn up. He couldn't go to the battlefield. "I didn't ask you to accompany me. When the snow stops, you can go your own way, and I'll go mine." Tang Yueshan thought of something and asked Gu Jiao, "How long will it take for the poison to take effect?" Gu Jiao said without changing her expression, "A month." Tang Yueshan thought for a moment. "That's enough. I'll go to ancient Moon City to find you in a month." Gu Jiao asked strangely, "Why do you have to go to Yi City?" Tang Yueshan said seriously, "My army is there. They've been captured by the Chun army. I'm going to rescue them." Gu Qingfeng wanted to taunt Tang Yueshan, but he couldn't find the words to do so. Tang Yueshan had snuck into a city occupied by the enemy alone. He knew that he was going to die, but he still did it without hesitation. It didn't matter if he was greedy for glory, or if he was full of sincerity, but this time, Gu Qingfeng couldn't find anything to say. Gu Jiao paused and asked, "What's the situation in the three cities now?" Tang Yueshan said, "Beiyang City and Yi City have been occupied by the Chun army. The one guarding Beiyang City is Prince Chun Guobua, the sixth prince of the Chun kingdom and Yuan Tang's uncle. He's the commander-in-chief of the Chun army. The one guarding Yi City is the Rong family of the Chun kingdom. Yuan Tang's uncle, General Rong Yao, is the vice commander-in-chief of the Chun army." Gu Jiao nodded. It was similar to the situation in the dream. "What about Lingguan City?" Gu Jiao continued to ask. Tang Yueshan said, "There are some Chun army in Lingguan City, but it's mainly guarded by the remnants of the previous dynasty. Princess Ning and son-in-law, Lord Fu Yun, has the blood of the previous dynasty's royal family. His uncle named himself King Yi. It's said that he's going to be the emperor soon." Gu Qingfeng said coldly, "They're overestimating themselves. The previous dynasty has been destroyed for 200 years. It's no longer in power. Do they really think they can overthrow the imperial power just because they bought some people and colluded with the Chun army? When my eldest brother comes, he'll lead the Gu army to wipe them all out." Gu Jiao didn't say anything. In the dream, Gu Chongqing did win the battle, but he was set up by a villain. The Gu army was almost wiped out and his legs were cut off. The snow in the pot was gone. Gu Jiao said, "I'll go get some snow." "I'll go," Gu Qingfeng said. "No need." Gu Jiao took the pot and went out. Only the old duke who was sleeping, and Gu Qingfeng and Tang Yueshan were left in the cave. "What are you looking at?" Gu Qingfeng rolled his eyes at him. He picked up some wet firewood from outside the cave and put it beside the fire. Tang Yueshan suddenly said, "She's my sister-in-law." Gu Qingfeng was taken aback by this abrupt question. "Why did it have to do with your sister-in-law? Who cares about your family's affairs?" Tang Yueshan also went out of the cave, leaving Gu Qingfeng alone in the wind. After a while, Gu Chengfeng patted his thigh and said, I remember now. He said that. It was a few days ago. Tang Yueshan mocked his grandfather for being sanctimonious, and said that he and Gu Jiao were children who grew up crooked. Gu Qingfeng then retorted to Tang Yueshan. One of the sentences was about Tang Yueshan seizing his younger brother's wife. I remember wrong. Tang Yueshan is the second son in the family, and Mrs. Tang is his sister-in-law. So when he said those words to me just now, he wanted to tell me that he wasn't seizing his younger brother's wife, but his sister-in-law? Gu Qingfeng was speechless. Tang Yueshan must be out of his mind. They still had to take turns to keep watch at night. In case Gu Jiao didn't wake him up again, Gu Chengfeng decisively kept watch for the first half of the night. In the second half, he didn't wake Gu Jiao up, but Tang Yueshan. It's your turn. Tang Yueshan woke up with the big bow in his arms. Without saying anything, he got up and dragged his injured left leg to the entrance of the cave. They couldn't light a fire at the entrance of the cave. It was too eye-catching and easy to be discovered. The cold wind whistled, blowing Tang Yueshan's body that was gradually getting cold. His leg was pierced through so he couldn't stand. He had to sit on the cold ground. Suddenly, a small figure came over. Tang Yueshan didn't need to look back to know who it was. He looked at the flying snow in front of him and said, What are you doing here? Gu Jiao threw something into his arms. It's time to take medicine. Tang Yueshan picked up the strange little capsule. Antidote. Gu Jiao said, Anti-inflammatory medicine. The latest chapter of this book is not finished yet. For more exciting content, please scan the QR code below to download the app. Novels are updated faster and more complete. Millions of novels are free to read. You can find all the novels that you can't find online. https://www.zhhbqg.com/89642_896428226/1095599091. HTML Genius memorized the website address in 1 second. www.zhhbqg.com Bikugo mobile reading website. zhhbqg.com. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.